Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if at the age of 10, Naruto is an honorary Anbu member part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The door opened silently. You wanted something, Hokage-sama? The third looked up from his paperwork momentarily and a smile played on his lips. In front of him stood one of his most prized shinobi, an Anbu member to be exact. The youngest Anbu member since Itachi, the prodigy himself. Sit down, no need for formalities. He remembered with a pang of remorse when the boy had called him old man. Those days were far too long ago now. The chubby cheeks had become harsher, more refined, whilst the brow had become stony and unyielding. The boy could hardly be called a machine, nor could he be called a child. Laying his pen to the desk, he was silently thankful for the interruption from paperwork. It would be the death of him someday. There always seemed to be a pile or three on his desk nowadays. Sarutobi leant back in his chair and turned his gaze back to the porcelain mask of the Anbu sat in the chair opposite him. Take the mask off, you're not on duty. There was a brief flicker of all too human hesitation, before the porcelain mask was removed and laid down carefully on the desk, a sound barely made. Calm, blue eyes stared calculatingly back at him, blonde sun-kissed hair framing his face. Once upon a time the boy would have grinning and fidgeting, declaring his dream to be the best ninja ever. No longer. The boy sat quietly, like a man 3 or 4 times his age. This wasn't to say that this boy was unsocial and cold-hearted, he was just professional. Sarutobi had seen him smile. Look at you, so young and yet already one the most powerful shinobi in Fire Country. He thought to himself, torn between regret and pride as he thumbed an edge of paperwork. Naruto. You are only 10 years old and are already at a point in power that is considered Kage level. This was acknowledged with a small smile. If anyone else had been in the room, they would have thought that the teenager didn't care, but Hiruzen Sarutobi saw that telltale flash of childish abandon behind the cool blue eyes. It had taken the council some time to realize how powerful the demon had become. There had been several moments where the old man had thought they were going to execute Naruto on the spot, that he was too dangerous to live. It had only been after Naruto had saved Homura and Koharu from an assassination attempt did they see how much Naruto could help their village, that it would be a mistake to dispose of such a valuable commodity. Time and again you have proven yourself, and I have seen with my own eyes that you are a natural leader. He had been taught by the best too, himself and Jiraiya, when his perverted student had managed to tear himself away from his research, but he had always wished that Tsunade would be able to teach him too. It was highly doubtful she would ever return, not after what happened to Nawaki and Dan. He wouldn't be surprised if she never thought about returning to Konoha again. The council has decided that you would be the best candidate for the place of the 5th Hokage. The boy simply nodded, although Sarutobi noticed the air of desperation that seemed to cloud over his face. He had wanted more of reaction, a smile, a punch to the air. Even dancing on the table might have been accepted. A memory stirred from a time before Naruto was born, when he had told Minato about his candidacy for the place of 4th Hokage. The third shuddered. He never wanted that to happen ever again. It had been mentally scarring. However, continued the third, coming back to his senses, that promotion is hardly immediate. There is important training to be done before then. There is one more mission to complete before your apprenticeship of sorts can be made official. There's an entourage of shinobi traveling from Hidden Grass to Hidden Waterfall. Our spy in Grass thinks that they may be plotting to kill the daimyo of fire. Any particular reason? Naruto asked, leaning back in his chair and staring at the ceiling before remarking coolly, it's not every day you plan to kill the daimyo. At this particular moment we're not sure, but they are suspected to be from a Wagakure. I see. The blonde murmured, glancing down at the floor before asking. How many? 30? Possibly more. The third took out a small stack of papers. This is the intelligence report our spy sent back. It has rough details of almost everyone in the entourage. Naruto took the small stack from the Hokage's grip, flicking through the papers absent-mindedly, before standing. Is that everything, Hokage-sama? For this mission you will be traveling with Kakashi and his squad. The third watched as Naruto's face light up. He and Kakashi had always gotten along, since the day they had met. I thought Kakashi-senpai was a sensei now. So he still calls him senpai. How amusing. Kakashi had been the one that taught Naruto the ropes of Anbu, and the boy still hadn't forgotten. He's on leave for the moment. Sarutobi sighed wearily, glancing in distaste at a particular mission report. C rank and still a fail. Kakashi's team were close to being disbanded. His team just came back from a rough mission. Naruto shrugged nonchalantly. All of them are tough. Then the boy picked up his mask. And he was gone. 3 masked figures were stood in the shadows of the giant gates of Konoha. Code-named Kitsune leant against the wall, checking through the mission's provisions for the upcoming journey. The second was obviously a woman. Her light blonde hair swept up out of the way behind her head, loose strands a more common occurrence than she had hoped. Code-named Tora. The third was by far the tallest, with dark black hair that shone blue in the moonlight and framed the Anbu mask. He stood perfectly still. Code-named Yama. Kitsune was tapping his foot agitatedly. "He'll be here soon, Kitsune-sama," she began, more than a hint of playful sarcasm in her lilting, silky voice. "Please don't call me that, Tora-chan." Tora smiled underneath her tiger mask. She considered Naruto to be like the little brother she never had after she had lost her friend Dino in an incident with a missing nin on a mission they had taken together. Her team knew that she still blamed herself for his death. It was just in her nature, no matter what ranks he had attained. Yama still didn't move, but Kitsune didn't really care. Yama was usually the silent type, not going out of his way to make conversation. Tora cared, and jabbed him in the ribs. "Come on, Yama-kun, lighten up, will ya?" she teased, ruffling his hair with a gloved hand as Yama flinched. Before the man had a chance to reach boiling point, a brief rush of air signaled the entrance of a fourth masked figure into the group. A gloved hand was raised in a sluggish greeting. "You're late," Tora yelled, ready to pounce on the last member of the squad in her fury, but held back by the stoic Yama, his hair still ruffled and drooping over the porcelain horns of his mask. "Well, you see, there was the little old woman," and the fourth member started, rubbing his silver-haired head with one of his hands. The fist that swung by his face narrowly missed, although his hair swayed slightly in the breeze as it sailed past. Tora's grin couldn't be seen, but it was painfully obvious when she sang out. "Don't lie, Inu-chan, don't you know what they do to bad dogs?" Kitsune raised a slim eyebrow as he sensed a familiar chakra signal making its way towards the gate. The Hokage was really making a personal visit? The man was still wearing the robes of office, but kept to the shadow of the alleyway. It was hardly the place for the Hokage to be seen so late at night. "I wouldn't have expected you to come see us off on such a mission," Naruto remarked, standing at attention. "Well, it is your last mission as Anbu Black Ops. I should at least wave you off." Naruto couldn't help but wince at those words. His last mission? Would that really just be it? His dreams ruined for the sake of protecting the hidden village? After a rush of air, only the Hokage was left, but the feeling of uneasiness still stayed. Nothing would go wrong. This was Konoha's piercing wind he was thinking about here, the most accomplished Anbu Konoha had ever seen. The cool dawn finally arrived and the squad stopped for a moment, perched high above the floor on ancient branches, the permeating smell of rotting undergrowth strong in their nostrils. Kitsune had gone ahead to scout the surrounding area. "Are we there yet?" Tora whined, looping lazily around a branch in her insatiable boredom. "No." Yama all but growled, having been asked that question every 10 minutes for the past 2 hours. Tora swung round, landing nimbly on her feet next to the annoyed man, who was seconds away from throttling her. "It's still a day away," Inu pointed out, relaxing against the worn tree trunk, seemingly asleep, but still keeping an eye out for Kitsune. "Lies." Tora spat, although her tone was kept childish rather than acidic, nudging Yama playfully before laying out on a branch in the sun. Yama shook his head. Anbu were supposed to be the elite of their village. Then why was almost everyone insane? There was no warning for the hand that suddenly found its way to his shoulder, and he started forward, barely avoiding a fall from the branch on which he was perched. Kitsune stood, mask peeled back from his face in an expression of bemused confusion, resting casually as if he had been sat there the whole time. The team knew each other personally, the masks were simply for the enemy now. Kitsune liked to think it was better this way. "Anything?" Inu asked, beginning to stand, although he already knew the answer if Naruto had removed his mask, but the blonde still shook his head. "There was nothing I could find." Kitsune shrugged, rolling his shoulder as it were stiff before allowing his arms to drop to his sides. "There aren't any patrols and they haven't set any traps. So they haven't even noticed we're here yet." Yama chuckled quietly. "That gives us the advantage." "Indeed that it does. Everybody ready to go?" Kitsune asked, checking their surroundings one last time before replacing the mask. "We just need to get in and out as quickly as possible." Inu instructed his squad with a grave tone. "We want no survivors who could possibly continue in their attempts to kill or overthrow the daimyo of Fire Country. We want no trace that it was Konoha either. Tora, it's your job to clean up the crime scene and plant the evidence." There was a tense silence that even Kunai couldn't cut. "So we go all out?" Tora whispered seriously, her voice laced with regret. Inu nodded. "The mission details say we spare nobody." Kitsune stared at the floor. Konoha had received word of mission success a couple of days ago. The Hokage, Hamura and Koharu were gathered in the main office, waiting for the returning shinobi. It was dark, although the Hokage had lit a candle and placed it upon the table, the still flame catching everyone's attention. The flame flickered once, then went out, and they started back as they were plunged into near darkness. A figure stood between them all, the moonlight glistening against the blood and the stench of decay strong in their nostrils. The Anbu mask was stained burgundy, the dried flakes peeling away to reveal bone white. The Hokage knew something was wrong just by the way Naruto was stood. Where was the rest of the team? Had the mission really been a success? Is everything out? The Hokage started, concerned by the blonde's behavior. Sarutobi only just managed to catch the mask before it cracked against his temple, the remnants of rust blood staining the edges of his ceremonial robes and palms. Naruto's eyes blazed wildly and his hair stood on end like he'd been struck by lightning. The boy's shoulders shuddered with barely contained rage. The room suddenly seemed too heavy to breath. I quit, Naruto growled, ruby red flecks dotting his eyes momentarily before he continued between gritted teeth. I can't take the role of Hokage. Then the boy was gone, leaving nothing but the tang of rotting flesh, blood stains on the floorboards, and the chipped Anbu mask in the hands of Sarutobi. He walked away from, muttered the Hokage, barely managing to hold himself in check. The old man sat still for a long moment, his thumb rubbing the roughed edges of the mask before his head dropped to his chest. He suddenly felt very old, and very afraid. It took less than 5 minutes for the remaining team members to arrive at the office. What happened, Kakashi? I heard the mission was a success. Sarutobi growled, his clawed hands still clutching at the mask as if somehow it would erase the past events. It was Hokage-sama. But something happened, the man began, clearly as perturbed as his leader. There was a confrontation. We're not sure on the details. Tora spoke. He wouldn't tell us anything. He didn't even speak to us the whole way back. Sarutobi mentally cursed. How did nobody know what was wrong? They saw the boy almost daily. Did he say something to you, Hokage-sama? Anything? Yama asked, also removing his mask. Hiruzen sighed wearily, allowing himself to feel human for a moment as he held his weary head in weathered hands. Unless I didn't hear him correctly, he just resigned from being a shinobi. Tora gasped, her deep brown eyes widening in surprise and fear. No! Permission to leave, Hokage-sama. Granted, she left in a burst of speed with Yama soon after her, without even bothering to ask the Hokage for permission to leave. Kakashi stood still, watching them run off and disappear around a corner. With his mask resting on the side of his head, he stared forlornly at the Hokage monument. I'm sorry, Minato-sensei, I couldn't even keep that promise for you. It was then that Sarutobi Hiruzen decided to leave for the night, for it would be a long day, and Hokages were not supposed to be human. 2 years later. He sat upright, sweat drenching his entire body and running in rivulets between his shoulder blades. His breathing was erratic and irrational. It was an ephemeral nightmare of the past and could no longer hurt him, but he allowed himself the selfish pleasure of being afraid. It was only then he realized how cold it was in his room, that he could see his misty breath in the air for a few seconds before it disappeared. The sweat on his skin began to prickle and he shivered. Outside it was still dark, the moonlight cast an eerie light on the building outside his murky bedroom window. Everything so still and quiet, not a sound was heard except his fitfully beating heart. He breathed in and out slowly, and rubbed his eyes. It was too late to go back to sleep now, he was wide awake. Naruto sighed and slipped out of his warm bed. He hissed as his feet came into contact with the cold wooden floor, lifting his feet as though the temperature hurt as he ran across his room to the cupboard where he kept his clothes. The stairs creaked as he made his way down to the ground floor. One of the floorboards was broken, and he had never got around to fixing it. It wasn't like he didn't have the time. He just never had the incentive to fix the broken board. In fact, most of his house was in a similar state. The only door that still worked creaked ominously whenever he used it, and the kitchen sink never seemed to drain. He was pretty sure there was a window pane in one of the abandoned rooms upstairs that had been smashed in a genin training exercise, but his house was avoided like a plague by the academy children. He hoped the stories about his dilapidated buildings were suitably scary to keep even the Chunin out of the way. The kitchen was as messy as ever, and a lonely cupboard door hung from rusted hinges. He'd fix it later. Empty instant ramen cups covered most of the counters, dirty cups and dishes littered the sink, and the kitchen cupboards were open, revealing the little food that was left, mostly instant. Cleaning was another thing he could never get around to do. Naruto selected out one of the few instant ramen cups in the cupboard nearest to him, filled it with boiling water and set it on the side, waiting until the piping hot water had cooked the ramen all the way through. He washed one of the forks, as the cutlery drawer was empty with its contents spread across various rooms in the house. 3 minutes passed. The fork was inserted into the boiling ramen, and the 12-year-old sat down in the only free space there was in the kitchen and living area, an old brown armchair. It was the only thing he bothered to keep clean anymore. Next to it stood a bookcase, but unlike most 12-year-olds' bookcases, there were only 2 or 3 brightly colored spines, the rest being dull, unimaginative colors, like gray or black. Those 3 books were the only color in the drab room. He nestled back into the armchair, tucking his feet under him with the ramen resting precariously on one of the arms, as he reached for a dark green book. The book was the color of dying grass, the cover stained with patches of dark brown, the gold lettering too faded for most to make out. The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja. Naruto traced the edge of the book, before turning to where his bookmark laid inside the book's musty pages. "Why don't you just give up?" shouted the furious enemy ninja. "I'm tired of playing hide and seek." I was tired now. This game of cat and mouse had gone on too long, and my chakra was running dangerously low. I opened my hand and looked down at my last 2 smoke bombs. I closed my eyes and thought of home, my helpless comrades and countrymen, praying that my hopeless plan would work. Throwing the bombs, I disappeared from the enemy line of sight. Naruto ate a few mouthfuls of ramen before turning back to his book. But I was too tired. Before I managed to even land a hit, the enemy had a kunai aimed at my head and forced me to my knees. "Give up, there's no use, you have lost," he spat, sneering down at me. But I would not give up without a last fight. That was my ninja way. "Can I just say one last thing?" I tried to get back to my feet and stare at my opponent in the eyes, but the enemy wanted to hear nothing more from me. "I don't want to hear it," he yelled, slamming me up against the tree. "Just give up and die." The body, the clone, pinned against the tree, disappeared in a puff of smoke. I stood behind him now, with a kunai against his neck, trying to make me give up. Rage built inside me. I would never give up. A few more mouthfuls of instant ramen disappeared from the cup. "Kagebunshin?" the enemy whispered, suddenly realizing he had been tricked. I knocked him to the ground with the flat of my hand. "Even if you kill me, another will take my place. They will attack the village." He laughed, looking up at me evilly. "There will be no peace as long as we live in this accursed world of ninjas." This was something that my mind had turned to recently, the pain and suffering that we brought upon the innocent world. "I will break the curse then," I told him. "If there's such thing as peace, I will find it. I will not give up." The smug look on his face was replaced by confusion. Who are you?" he asked. A leaf fell from the overhanging trees. "My name is..." He set the book back down on the shelf and stacked the empty ramen cup next to it. It brought back bad memories, too many parallels that made his head spin. Jiraiya loved that book, as did his father, so it seemed by the note Jiraiya had penciled in the first few pages of the novel. Naruto had never loved the book. It seemed hollow propaganda more than anything. Fight for your village. Die for your village. That was all it really wanted to say in the end. There was nothing truly admirable about that. He was interrupted from his thoughts by the sunlight that had begun to filter through the small window to his right, letting him know that dawn was approaching, and that the shop that he worked in needed opening before the sun got too high. He did not own the shop. It was Jiraiya's. It wasn't the ideal place to old to work, but he had no parents to pay for the things that he needed, and he refused to accept anything from the sandame. He worked at a bookstore, where he sold the newest Ika books. Kakashi was a frequent customer, since he insisted on taking the brightly bound book everywhere, and they weren't exactly jutsu-proof yet. The amount of times the silver-haired jounin had come in with a soggy stodge of paper after a suiton jutsu that came a bit too close, or a piece of chart paper when he forgot to avoid a katon jutsu, were beyond human comprehension. Of course there were other customers that came, both men and women, but he remembered no faces. There was a small section near the back of the store that sold The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja and its much unknown sequel, but very few even bothered to look. But if they had, they would have seen a well-polished shelf and almost lovingly arranged stacks of books. But no one cared about those books. Ika was what came first. Naruto walked through his front door, quickly locking it before walking down the dim street towards the bookshop. The street was almost silent, and he could only see one window lit up, the shadows of human life stirring behind closed shutters. The street lamps were beginning to dim and die, and the sky to the east was turning a lighter purple. Sunrise was only an hour or so away now. People would begin to appear on the streets, and by then he wanted to be hidden in the shop which few people visited. The rusted, brown key entered the ancient lock, and there was an audible thunk as the mechanism opened and the dark brown door swung inwards, jingling. A little bell hung over the doorway. He closed the door and woodenly changed the small hanging sign from closed to open, and sat back in his chair waiting for the customers to arrive. Naruto watched the young academy students running down the street and smiled a little. He himself had never been to the academy, or any kind of place that had involved children his own age. He had never spent time growing up like these children would. His training had been intense from the day he had begun. He had been ruthlessly pushed to be better than anyone else, perform things that people twice his age would be hard-pressed to follow. It had been living hell, constant sessions of healing to repair worn, malformed bones, their childish structure unable to cope under the strain of constant use, to repair torn muscles and chakra pathways. It was enough to wish that you'd never been born. The bell rang. "Good morning, sir," Naruto nodded from his seat behind the paneled counter, idly flicking through a book on the history of Konoha, a book he knew off by heart, but there were some sections he'd never get tired of. "What can I help you with this morning?" The boy's tone was abrupt, almost enough to be considered impolite, but his words were polite enough, and it was rare that his sharp nature would turn away customers, plus the true Ika fans knew that this shop was the one that mysteriously seemed to have the signed copies. The customer didn't seem at all bothered by the clipped tones directed towards him, and instead smiled lopsidedly. "Good morning there, Naruto. I suppose you heard that the new Ikas were in then? News travels fast these days." "I suppose it does." The customer wandered over to a gleaming bookcase, the heavy scent of old wood and paper an almost relaxing concoction. "You seem to be keeping well." "And you as well. I heard you passed your first genin team not too long ago." Kakashi sighed, shoulders tensed and head bowed. "It's not going too well, is it?" Naruto's tone broke, dropping from casual indifference to that of genuine concern, his book forgotten and his eyes firmly raised. "Who are they?" Kakashi seemed surprised. He made it a habit to drop by the bookshop every month or so after he discovered that his old student had reappeared amongst the musty pages. But the boy rarely responded to anything outside his work, and never had he talked about shinobi matters. "Uchiha Sasu. I bet he's just a bucket of fun." Naruto chuckled, rubbing his temples his right hand as he continued to look up at Kakashi. "The council decided I could teach him how to use the Sharingan," he shrugged, "and I got Harino Sakura." "Never heard of her, or the family. Do you think she's going to last?" "Truthfully, she has a little promise, but she's unfocused. Harino is just a young girl after all. If she's out on the field, and she's not focused, Harino will just get killed," Naruto noted dryly with a nonchalant wave of his hand, "young or not." The older man nodded, disliking the coldness of the Naruto's words but not criticizing for fear it would stop the boy from talking. This was, after all, the first proper conversation they had had in a long while, but he couldn't help but wonder exactly why. "And a kid called Kensuke. You got Tora's nephew? Ouch." He was a little loud and a little volatile, clearly taking after his aunt in more ways than one, but his parents often tried to dissuade him from taking up the life of a Konoha ninja. They were a calm, respectable family more involved in agriculture than fighting. "He's unrefined," Kakashi noted, "but no matter how hard I push, they don't act like a team. It's not looking good for them." "Will you fail this team as well?" Kakashi frowned, his brow furrowing as he thought about his options. Did he really want to fail them? He felt like he owed it to the village to take care of Sasuke, and Tora to take care of her nephew. Sakura was something he just had to put up with. I don't know, they're currently on probation after their last mission. Even with the Chunin exams coming up, I don't think I'd put them forward." Naruto took a slim brown box from a nearby bookcase, popped the lid and promptly shoved it under the counter. He nodded as Kakashi explained the poor situation, but didn't offer any advice. There was a moment of silence. "Are there times when you question Dash?" Naruto stopped, midway through his sentence, and grimaced. Kakashi was more than eager to hear what the boy had to say and made the mistake of asking. "I didn't hear what you said there." Naruto's grimace turned into an expression of pained silence, before it melted away and he replied. "Forget I said anything, please. I have a busy day and some cataloging to finish by noon. So if you don't mind." "Oh, sure." The older man felt hurt that he was being dismissed so abruptly, especially after it seemed like Naruto was about to open up to him again. "I guess I'll see you around." Naruto nodded, but didn't say another word, simply watching the Jounin leave the shop with hardened blue eyes. His hand shook as he opened the door to the back room and poured himself a cup of tea. The tea brought back haunting memories, but the doctor said it would dull his nerves. So he drank. "What are you going to do then, senpai?" the young blonde asked. Kakashi shook his head, replacing the first ever Ika book back in his kunai pouch. "I'm not really sure, it just doesn't feel right. I don't think they're old enough yet. They have a right to be children before we force them to grow up." He looked over at his young companion, suddenly painfully aware at just how young this boy was. Had he not deserved a childhood too? Naruto looked wistful for a moment, staring down from their perch at the top of the gargantuan gates to the village. Don't worry, senpai, I don't care anymore. Naruto smiled, stretching his arms awkwardly above his head, which forced Kakashi to remember the injury the young boy had received on their last mission. So do you think that you will ever pass a team? Kakashi chuckled. When I find the right team, I might just pass them. Naruto nodded, running a hand through his wild blonde hair with a sigh. An action which couldn't help but remind Kakashi of how much Naruto looked like his father. They'll have to be pretty special for that, huh? The sun had begun to disappear now and the sky was taking a purple hue, and since there were no customers there was nothing keeping him at the shop any longer. Business had been rather slow that day, not that it was ever hectic. It did have a particularly seedy reputation. He knew that as soon as the word got out about the new, signed, limited edition copies of Ica Ica Paradise that were being sold, the village's perverts were likely to crawl out of the woodwork. Naruto winced. It would not be pretty. He breathed out, unaware that he had been holding his breath. The run-in with Kakashi that day had left him feeling shaken, no matter how much herbal tea he had drunk. Just don't think about it. So much easier if you don't remember. If you simply forget, but there was something that refused to let him forget. There was something that refused to allow him to forget all the blood that he had shed. At the beginning he had been so young and naive, he had understood about life and death. Anbu would never have accepted him into their ranks if he did not, but he had never truly understood that what he did affected people indirectly. The man that had been hired by one political leader to kill another, most likely because he needed the money to feed his family, or care for them if they were sick. Without his income they would starve and die. Naruto would have killed the target if that's what the mission required. Only a handful of failed missions, compared to the hundreds he had completed during his years in Anbu. How many people had been affected indirectly by those missions? How many had starved? Died? Become too ill to care for their own families? It was the last mission that... No! He shook his head violently and picked up the keys to the shop, his hand trembling a little. No, it's all in the past. I'm sorry. The bell jingled as the door was opened, and Naruto could still hear the thing as he shut and locked it. I never meant for it to turn out like this. Stars began to flicker into life above the rapidly darkening streets, the moon already filling Konoha with a silver glow, and the still people on the street were buzzing with excitement. There was a festival tomorrow. Naruto wouldn't be going. He had never gone to the festival, no matter how much Jiraiya, the Sandaime, or Kakashi tried to force him to go. His house was just up ahead, but he turned down one of the side streets instead. The shaking in his hands hadn't subsided and he didn't feel like going home yet. It wasn't as if anyone would miss him if he came home late. It was dark now, the sky an inky black, stars a stark contrast, shining brightly. He avoided a trio of children who were too busy in their game to notice anyone in their way. He could hear as they disappeared was a girl yelling, "We're so gonna get done for this Konohamaru-kun." Naruto stopped and looked back in curiosity. Konohamaru? The grandson of the Sandaime Hokage? He strained his eyes to see if he could see the backs of the retreating figures, but they had already disappeared. Last time I saw Konohamaru he must have been about 4 or 5 years old. He laughed softly. I wonder if he remembers me. I used to see him quite often when he was younger. He continued his walk along the street, with no particular destination in mind, managing to skillfully avoid those main road where the most people walked. A cool wind ruffled his hair, making it dance like a field of straw. What he would give to start his life all over again. His feet took him to the outskirts of Konoha, towards the eastern training grounds. He only went there for one reason. The dark marble epitaph stood like a lonely stranger in the clearing, the moonlight reflecting on its smooth surface, the engraved names clearly defined in the stone's eerie glow. He crouched down next to the stone and traced a finger down the hundreds of names on the cenotaph. The first name that he knew. Uchiha Obito. He had been one of his senpai's best friends. He had died long before Naruto had been born, but he had been the one that had taught Kakashi that friends always come before the rules. His finger traced further down the marble surface. Namikaze Minato. The Yondaime, his father. I'm sorry, father, you wanted me to be strong and protect the village. I just can't do it. The next name that he knew. Kogen Danu. A team mate of Tora's before she became Anbu. He had been killed by a missing Nin on a recon mission. The missing Nin was Okini Mejuru, the third member of Tora's original Genin team. She very rarely spoke about them. The next name was a fresher scar. Yuryu Asamaru. Yama. The details of his death were classified. Only those in Anbu and the Hokage himself had known how Yama had died. The only known thing about his death had been that he was killed in action, like the rest of those on the cenotaph. Naruto shook his head bitterly. Did they not understand? Did they not realize that becoming a shinobi only meant death and destruction? Destroying the long-awaited peace that others strived so hard to achieve? Why had he once dreamed to be Hokage? He didn't know anymore. Was it for respect? Power? Admiration? Fear? It had been a child's dream, nothing more. To be Hokage was to be the leader of the destruction and the destroyer of peace, nothing more than that. It was a foolish dream, he whispered in the night, but there was no one around to hear him. He stood to his feet, stretching his hands above his head, and yawned. The moon was high up in the jet sky by now. How long had he been out here? Longer than he had planned anyway. The breeze was cooler now, with an edge that wasn't there before. He pushed his hands further into his pockets. The house was cold when he got back, the rooms as silent as tombs. Naruto was the only thing that moved. He sat down in his worn armchair, casting a brief glance at the faded green book he had been reading earlier but resisted the urge to read. He heated a cup of water to make tea, but sat and simply watched the vapor trails until they wisped away and the water was cold. The room was given one quick look over before the light was switched off and the silent room was plunged into darkness. Tomb was a fitting word. Naruto kicked off his shoes and they landed with an audible thunk next to his bed, causing the entire frame to shudder. He undressed and crept under the ice-cold blankets, hoping that they would warm up soon. He was sure that ice cubes would be comfortable with this temperature. Naruto had meant to be home earlier to turn the heating on, but well, it didn't matter now. Golden sunlight filtered through the murky glass, shining in the blonde's eyes, waking him up from his peaceful slumber. He cursed before rolling onto his side and stretching. He would have preferred to sleep in, today of all days especially, but he needed to be up and about early, so he didn't get caught in the rush of people shopping for the festival. Naruto boiled the kettle and grabbed the last miso-flavored instant ramen out of the cupboard, then cursed when he remembered that his shoes were upstairs. Pouring the boiling water into the cup, he bolted upstairs and grabbed his shoes from where he had thrown them the night before, and then bolted back down. He cleaned the fork he had used the night before, not bothering to dig out any of the others that he was sure were hidden beneath the mounds of unused, dirty plates and dishes. One day he would get around to it, just not today. The ramen was devoured in seconds, leaving an empty cup and yet another dirty fork to throw onto the stack of dirty plates. He counted through the money he had left in his wallet, just in case, and then left through the front door. Naruto prayed that he didn't bump into Kakashi or Jiraiya. The bag rested uncomfortably in his hands, the thin plastic handles digging deep into the flesh of his hands. People already filled the streets, getting ready for the festival that night. He saw something out of the corner of his eye that forced him to stop and take a second look. How long had it been since he had last visited Ichiraku's ramen stand? It seemed to be pretty empty. That was good. He pushed through the crowd towards the ramen stand, wincing as he was crushed between the constantly moving mass of bodies. Ducking down low, he managed to squeeze through the crowd. He grabbed one of the stools and vaulted onto it, breathing out a sigh of relief. "One miso ramen, please." The brown-haired woman turned from where she had been cleaning the used dishes that had been used by previous customers, a surprised expression crossing her face. "Is that you, Naruto-kun?" How long had it been since she had last seen Naruto? She didn't know the answer, but it had been a long time since the blonde boy had sat in front of the counter and ordered something. Was it about a year? A year and a bit since he had last visited? Couldn't see the 3-year-old Naruto that used to visit Ichiraku's with the third Hokage, shouting things like "one day I'm gonna be Hokage" or ramen. This boy, he couldn't really be classed as that boy any longer. He was not the cheerful blonde that he had once been. She didn't know what had made him leave the shinobi forces, but it had hurt him in more than one way. His blonde hair was shaggy and unkempt, falling over blue eyes that stared out hollowly from a worn face. The bowl of steaming ramen was placed in front of her blonde customer. "So how've you been, Naruto-kun?" The boy looked up from his noodles and shrugged. "Alright, I suppose." He shrugged. "How about you?" "Everything's good. We should be getting a lot of customers with the festival on tonight." She trailed off as she saw him tense up. Then she remembered something. "It's your birthday today, isn't it, Naruto-kun?" She smiled as the boy didn't look up, playing with his ramen with a chopstick. "Yeah, it is," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. "Are you doing anything special? Inviting friends around?" He looked up and shrugged. "Not really, just a quiet night at home. I don't like the crowds." "So you're not going to the festival tonight then? It would be good fun, I promise. I'll treat you to free ramen." She smiled brightly, But her attempt was in vain. He had already finished his bowl and was standing up. I'm not going to the festival. It's a waste of time, really. He began to count out the coins onto the counter, but Ayam waved a hand to stop him. It's on the house, Naruto-kun. She smiled. He looked up and let out a small smile, and Ayam could almost see the younger, happier Naruto, but soon it was replaced by a mask of indifference. Thanks, Ayam. I might see you soon if there's more free ramen. Drip. 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 Every single drip from the tap made all his hair stand on end. Jumping up from his seat, he stalked over to the offending, infernal kitchen sink and grabbed the leaking faucets with his hands. They groaned pitifully as he jammed them closed, and metal shrieked as they were contorted into foreign shapes, bent in odd directions. Damn! At least water wasn't spraying everywhere. The lights from the festival caused the sky to light up, making the usual, comforting, inky blackness turn to an orange glow. He wondered what happened at the festival. What did people do? They were supposed to be mourning, remembering those lost, not celebrating like they did. He could hear laughter, and the tinkling of the small bell-like toys the children waved on the sticks, and could imagine the lanterns drifting off into the night sky, like man-made stars. Naruto closed his eyes and breathed out as his resolve wavered. Perhaps he could just. His eyes snapped open. What was he thinking? Nestling into the warmth of his armchair, he rested his head and drifted away. When had he fallen asleep? He never remembered falling asleep, and what had woken him up? Butim. He sat very still for a few seconds, his heart beating like a drum in his chest, mouth as dry as the paper in the book that had been thrown to the floor. Butim. Naruto got silently to his feet, padding towards the kitchen door, instinctively making each footstep as noiseless as the last. He restricted the urge to ask if someone was there, waiting in the shadows of his hall. Butim. There. A noise, if only for a second, and the whisper of cloth against skin as someone carelessly shifted their weight from one foot to another. An intruder? Yet he had locked his door earlier, so that meant that whoever was in his hallway was either a ninja, or a very talented lockpick. He glanced around the room for any possible weapons to defend himself. Kunai. Why had he given Kakashi all his damn kunai? I don't need them anymore. He handed over his kunai pouch. The single gray eye looked up at him concerned. You don't have tea. The kunai pouch was thrown at the silver-haired man. Take it. At the time it had seemed to be the right decision. Even yesterday that idea was a good idea. But right now, the second, that idea had not been thought through enough. How was a normal civilian boy supposed to look after himself? He would have parents, Naruto thought bitterly as he leant into the shadows of the kitchen wall, blending in, as he formulated a plan to combat his late-night intruder. All his knives were hidden in the dirty cluster that were his unclean dishes and empty ramen cups. He had no kunai, no shuriken, and he had given his ninjato back when he had left the service of the Black Ops. That just left taijutsu or ninjutsu, and he silently cursed. Those were some of the things he had sworn never to use ever again. Perhaps if he just left by a window? He looked up at the grimy windows and tried to remember the occasion when had he last opened them. The rust seemed to have melded them shut from the look of it. They were obviously not on his list of options right now. So maybe he could sneak past? The intruder was making his way carefully up the hall now, and his chakra signature well hidden. The only thing that had Naruto alerted to his presence was the small rasping noise as the intruder's feet came into contact with the wooden floor. He readied his hands into the correct seal and breathed in. Damn! Why does this have to happen? My Seigakyu no Jutsu, he whispered, hoping that whoever was creeping up his corridor had not heard him. It was as if new life had been poured into his veins, like a refreshing wave that washed away the staleness beneath his skin. But he couldn't allow himself to be overwhelmed by the fresh power coursing through his pathways. This was the only way he could think of that did not involve violence. He had promised that day he would never commit an intentional act of violence towards another human being as long as he lived. Now completely unseen, Naruto waited without movement, until the intruder had begun to make his way up the stairs and into the upper rooms. The footsteps came closer still, and now Naruto could see the figure of a full-grown man, kunai in hand, creeping down the corridor. Naruto waited for the intruder to step on the squeaky floorboards, but the familiar sound never came, and it made his blood run cold. The intruder had scouted the house before. It was the only way he could have known about the floorboard. This is it, Naruto thought to himself, now or never. He stepped carefully from his hiding place, not making a sound. The jutsu might make sure no one saw you, but they could as sure as hell hear you if you put one foot out of place. The door was in front of him now, the silver-blue moonlight looking even more inviting than usual, bathing part of his hall in an otherworldly glow. His breaths were shallow and controlled, each and every footfall silent as falling snow. His pulse should have been racing, like anyone else in that kind of situation, but his pulse was merely quickened, and his mouth a little dry. Warm flesh touched cool metal as his fist enclosed the door handle. He stole a quick look back. No sign of his intruder returning yet, but he had to leave quickly. He threw open the door, and the hinges squeaked wildly, echoing around his silent house, and Naruto swore. The door was flung shut behind him as his heart beat hard rhythms against his ribcage as he disappeared like a wraith into the darkness of night, ghosting towards the main street with his feet gliding over the street cobbles, like he wasn't a being of this world. Normally the rooftops would have been a better option, as the streets were usually crowded or blocked off during the festivals, where the roofs were almost always empty, unless there were other shinobi-going places as well, but a civilian moving on the roofs at night during a festival attracted a certain amount of unwanted attention. Naruto was certain that he had lost whoever had tried to attack him earlier, but he wouldn't slow down until he reached a main street, where there were more people to fade into. Even if it did mean going to the festival, he didn't have to enjoy himself. There's too many people, Naruto thought to himself as he avoided being crushed by the masses of bodies that engulfed him from all sides. He longed to go back to his house, where there was only him and the silent books, but he wouldn't be able to go back there tonight, just in case whoever it had been earlier had stayed there and wait for him to come back. Naruto needed to find Kakashi, and ask if he could crash at his for the night, but there was no telling where he'd be able to find the one-eyed Jounin teacher. Ichiraku's would have been nice and relaxing right now, but it would be full to the brim with loud, laughing people, and he had left his wallet back in his rooms. As he got towards the main square, the crowd began to thin out a little, which allowing Naruto breathing space, and he accepted it gratefully. After 2 years of living a pretty solitary life, so many people in the same place became a bit unnerving. He scanned over the faces of the people surrounding him, searching for the face of the silver-haired Jounin. Kakashi always came to the festival, so where was he? Market stalls lined the street ahead of him, selling all manner of things, from toys and sweets, to clothes and trinkets. People crowded around each one, bartering with the stall owners for the best price. Perhaps Kakashi was along here? Naruto wandered along the street with his hands pressed deep into his pockets. Why did people come here? He had never thought to ask anyone that before. Why did they come to a festival that celebrated death and destruction? The street was bathed in a golden glow from the hundreds of fairy lights strung along the walls and the various stands selling their goods. Small children, awake far past their usual bedtime, ran through the crowd, weaving in and out of the people, laughing and shouting, the bell toys jingling with their footsteps. Naruto took the opportunity and smiled a little. It was nice to see them so happy and oblivious to the rest of the world, but looking around, it wasn't just the children. Adults had a certain spark in their eyes, smiles on their faces, civilian and shinobi alike. It made no sense, but there was just a feeling of happiness that surrounded the whole street, if not the whole of Konoha. He absent-mindedly sidestepped a cream blur, a Niken, if his eyes didn't lie, even if this one was a little on the runty side. Akamaru! Come back! Naruto turned to where the voice had come from, but couldn't see whoever it was who had shouted. An Inuzuka? A boy around his own age burst from the crowd, wearing a gray jacket with a black fur lining, looking frantically left and right. Mom was joking. Honest. Had the Niken run away? He had known an Inuzuka once. She had been a friend of Tora's, not that they had ever really been introduced. Naruto stopped his nostalgia to stare at the feral-looking boy, who seemed to be getting hysterical at the loss of his closest friend. Naruto guessed that he and his dog didn't really separate much, and was asking the people around him if they had seen the Niken pass. Naruto sighed. Hey! He shouted, and the Inuzuka turned. Your Niken went that way. Naruto shouted again, pointing towards the street where he had last seen the Nin dog. The Inuzuka smiled, canine teeth flashing in the orange light. Thanks? Naruto the blonde replied. It was most likely he would never talk to the Inuzuka again. What was the harm in telling the boy his name? He began to run towards the street that Naruto had pointed out. My name's Kiba, Inuzuka Kiba, nice to meet you, Naruto. The Inuzuka Kiba disappeared after his dog, and just like that the encounter was over. Well, that was interesting, and wondered what time it was. By the height of the moon it was sometime after 11, but he had left his watch behind when he had to escape the house. And where in the world was Kakashi? The last market stall held no sign of the elusive man, and Naruto couldn't help but sigh for what felt like the millionth time that night. Perhaps Ichiraku's wasn't such a bad idea. It was certainly no worse than sitting out here in the busy street, even if he had already been to Ichiraku's that morning. It was just up ahead. He could see the sign from where he was on the street, and it didn't seem too full. There were only a few customers at the counter. Perhaps it was too late for some people to eat, and the plethora of sweet treat stalls were no doubt drawing away the usuals. His stomach rumbled, painfully reminding him that he had forgotten to eat that evening. There was one free seat, at the very edge on the left. He ran and vaulted onto it before anyone else got there before him. "A miso, please." Ayam looked down and her face split into a wide, childish grin. "You came, Naruto-kun?" He looked up, face awkwardly trying to smile like it had forgotten how. "I guess I did after all." "One extra large birthday ramen coming up." Naruto continued to smile awkwardly, before allowing his smile to drop as Ayam turned her attention to cooking. The mouth-watering, savory smells drifting from the pans. "Naruto-kun?" Another voice asked, and a single gray creased into an upside-down U shape. "It's nice to see you out at the festival." It was then that the silver-haired Jounin noticed the amount of killing intent the blonde radiated. What did I do?" "You've been here the whole time?" The blonde hadn't even turned his way. He was staring at the counter in front of him, face deadpan and expressionless, but with hunched, tense shoulders. Kakashi rubbed the back of his head. "Which answer would get him killed?" "I just got here." The blonde looked up and nodded, face still serious, but Kakashi felt like he had avoided a death sentence. He was surprised when he heard him say, "I was just wondering, I need a place to crash tonight, can I stay at yours?" And Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" he asked the young boy warily. "Well, someone broke in, so I escaped." Naruto shrugged. "No big deal." Kakashi lost his bored, half-awake look. Now he looked like he was ready to go and break some necks. "Were they armed?" he growled. "If a kunai counts." Naruto shrugged, leaning against the counter as Ayam delivered his bowl of ramen. Their conversation paused for a moment as the blonde took a bite, despite Kakashi wanting to clarify the situation, and they were soon interrupted. "What you doing, Kakashi-sensei?" a voice questioned childishly. A boy with a wild mop of dark blonde hair and green eyes popped over Kakashi's shoulder. His name was Hikuro Kensuke, nephew of Hikuro Naruki, otherwise known as Tora. "I'm doing nothing, Kensuke-kun, absolutely nothing." His green eyes swiveled to Naruto. "And who's this Kakashi-sensei?" "A friend, Naruto. Meet Kensuke." He leaned backwards, so the other two members of Team 7 were visible. "The pink-haired girl is Haruno Sakura." She was pretty, Naruto thought, even if her forehead was a little on the large side, but Sakura was currently focusing all her attention on the other member of Team 7. And the last member, Kakashi hoped that Naruto wouldn't react to obviously Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto nodded. He had been friends with another Uchiha once. His second Anbu captain after Kakashi himself had been Uchiha Itachi. When Itachi had abandoned the village, Naruto had been promoted as the next Anbu captain for the squad. He had protested, refused and downright rejected the job with a vengeance, but after the Sandaime himself had asked the blonde, he had no choice but to accept the promotion. But Itachi's desertion of the village had hurt him deeply. "Interesting bunch you have there, sensei." Naruto nodded in acknowledgement, slipping in an old term which felt fitting for the situation. Kakashi hadn't been his sensei in years. "Sensei?" Kensuke opened his eyes even wider than they already were, making him look like an owl. "Does that mean Kakashi-sensei is your teacher too?" Naruto stopped and looked up at the fidgeting child. "No, it was a slip of the tongue," he said calmly, before he turned back to Kakashi. "So can I stay at yours?" Kakashi nodded and laughed. "It'll be just like the old days, huh?" Yeah, Naruto turned wistfully to his huge bowl of ramen. "Just like the old days." Kakashi turned on the light to the spare room, before walking over to one of the cupboards to pull out some spare linen. "You can crash here, the fridge is yours, get up whenever you want." I just like the old days," Naruto noted, and Kakashi felt like it really was like the old days and they'd just come back from a mission. Those were always the rules when they'd crashed and burned after missions. Kakashi turned back towards the door. "Wait, Kakashi." Kakashi turned back to face the young blonde. "Why do people celebrate the festival? Isn't it sad for them?" Naruto looked up, and for the first time in a long time Kakashi saw a flicker of the shinobi the boy had once been. "I just don't get it." "It is sad, but we honor the dead. We only won that day because of their help, their sacrifice, so we should be happy we're alive. We owe it to them." Naruto frowned, cerulean blue eyes staring. "They sacrificed themselves so that we could live happily." Kakashi continued. "We should be happy?" Naruto's face turned towards the bed, clearly lost in thought. "Thank you," he murmured finally, but he never raised his head. Kakashi nodded and smiled. "Good night, Naruto-kun." The light flicked off. Haha, finally Naruto's question that's been bugging him has been answered. and I fixed a few errors here and there. Sunlight filtered through the newly cleaned glass, shining directly into the sleeping boy's eyes, and for a brief second he regretted cleaning everything up, but only for a second. Swinging his feet around, he got up from his bed and walked towards the wardrobe. This time the floorboard didn't squeak, but had been taken up and a new board been nailed down in its place. Kakashi's spending spree at the bookstore had helped to pay for that. The kitchen counter was visible for the first time in a long time, but only after Naruto had spent hours delving out the jungle that was old ramen cups and dirty cutlery with the help of a rather reluctant ninja and his team. He had even gone to the trouble of hiring them as a D-rank mission. Even if the genin weren't impressed they had to do a D rank. It was the only way for them to get a C rank or higher after their probationary period. Jiraiya had sent back some money, and the bookstore had been going pretty well recently, since people had bought the newly released Ika Ika books as early Christmas presents, and a movie was on the way, and with the money he made, he'd done up the house. The kitchen had been cleaned, as had all the floors and windows, the floorboards had been repaired, the taps had been fixed, he had bought a few pieces of new furniture. It was going quite well in Naruto's opinion. Kakashi's team were out of the village, having completed enough D-rank missions to be given their first C rank, escorting a merchant back to his house on the outskirts of Suna. It was simple escort mission, no doubt they would be back soon. Am I missing them? I don't even know them that well. They had been around the house helping for a week, while Kensuke had just shouted a lot, but missing them? Kensuke would provide the main part of the conversation, waving his arms excitedly like an overactive windmill, a wide grin of childish abandon on his face, as he told Naruto about how great a shinobi he would be, and how one day he would be the next Hokage. Naruto had just nodded politely, rather than telling the genin what life as a ninja was really like. Sakura would sit around, staring at the Uchiha like a love-sick puppy and occasionally adding her 2 cents worth to the conversation as well. The Uchiha had just stared darkly at Naruto, barely saying a sentence the whole time they had worked there, probably hating every second he and his team spent together. Kakashi was worried that perhaps Sasuke had remembered that Naruto had once stopped by his house to talk to Itachi, but he was sure that Sasuke wouldn't remember such small details as that. 2 years with nobody, then no more than a week with people around, and I missed their company? He shook his head. Since when did I get so sentimental? Suppressing a smile, he walked to the front door. He had spent enough time inside. A week passed. And then I defeated him all on my own, Kensuke finished. A fist knocked him off the stool. You did not, Kensuke. Sasuke saved us all. You didn't help. One little bit. A mad-looking Sakura stood over the poor boy, who was nursing a purple bruise on the side of his head. Sasuke was too busy ignoring everybody. Kakashi had actually passed this team? Their teamwork was so warped it was just inexistent. They had all decided to meet up for ramen at Ichiraku's to celebrate the completion of their first relatively successful sea mission. He had listened to Kensuke talk non-stop about the mission, about the things they had seen and the food they had eaten, and about the unforgiving landscape of Suna. So what did you do while we were away, Naruto-kun? He asked. Naruto shrugged, missing the company. Was what he wanted to say, but instead he blurted work. The Uchiha leant forward, directing his gaze at Naruto. You work? Don't you go to school or something? Well, that was the most I've ever heard him say. No, I used to go to school, that was kind of the truth, but I left. Kensuke's mouth turned into an O shape. You left school? Sakura asked as her jade green eyes widened in amazement. Naruto nodded. Yeah. That's so unfair. Kensuke whined comically, crossing his arms and pouting in Naruto's direction. Was it the Ninja Academy? Sasuke surprised Naruto again by asking another question. What had got the Uchiha so talkative all of a sudden? Naruto bit his lip. Damn all Uchihas. No, it was the civilian school. Why'd you leave? Kensuke asked, his eyes like saucers. It was kinda creepy. I didn't agree with it. If only Kensuke knew what they were really talking about. Didn't your parents force you to go back? Sakura asked, for once her back turned to the Uchiha. I don't have parents. He almost laughed at the Uchiha's expression. What? He expected himself to be the only orphan. At least he still has a brother. I wondered why we didn't see your parents when we were tidying up, Sakura added. I thought they might be on a mission or something. Well, that's decided then. Kensuke stood up and slammed his hands down on the counter, earning a death glare from Ayam and Tuchi. You're coming to my house tonight for dinner. What? Naruto looked at the boy. For dinner? Yeah. Even Aunt Naruki said she would be there. Aunt Naruki? Tora? This isn't going to end well. 7 o'clock by the academy gates. That's when Kensuke had said to meet him in this exact location. No doubt the boy was going to be a little late. Naruto laughed at his situation. He hadn't seen Naruki in 2 years, after he'd refused to talk to her, and now he was going to a family dinner with her? Did fate have a twisted sense of humor? The sounds of running feet met his ears and he glanced down at the watch on his wrist. Not too late then. I'm so sorry, I forgot how long it takes to get to the academy. Kensuke apologized, out of breath. I wasn't waiting long, a lie, but did it really matter if the kid was late? Mom. Dad. I'm back. He hoped that neither of them recognized him from his Anbu days. He had been around enough times at least for them to remember his face, but it had been 2 years. Was Tora not here yet? We're just about ready to start serving. Bring your friend through, Naruto heard a female voice say. Obviously this was Kensuke's mom. Come on. Kensuke all but dragged Naruto into the dining area. At the head of the table sat Kensuke's father and Tora's brother, Hikuro Taihei. He looked very similar to Naruki, except his eyes were the golden color of his hair, rather than his sister's brown, and his hair was a slightly more vibrant. So you must be Kensuke's new friend? Taihei hadn't changed since the last time Naruto had seen him. His voice was so relaxing and his personality so calm. Where had Kensuke come from? Yes. I am Uzumaki Naruto. The older man's eyes screwed up in concentration. Have I seen you around before, Naruto-kun? Goddamn Taihei for being so observant. I don't think so, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Sit down, the food should be ready soon, he sighed. Is Aunt Naruki coming? Kensuke asked excitedly as they sat themselves around the table. She should be, but who knows what she does anymore, Taihei chuckled sadly. Naruto perked his ears. Naruki had always put her family first, so what was wrong? A woman with long, dark brown hair came through the doorway, carrying a tray full of various steaming dishes. Her light jade eyes were full of humor, but she seemed pretty relaxed, smiling kindly at Kensuke and her husband. Naruto felt that he was intruding in this family moment. He wanted to be any place but here. Well, I hope you like ramen, Naruto-kun. She smiled at him, including him in their moment of happiness. Kensuke said that you liked it, so I cooked it especially for you. A smile broke across his face, hoping that it didn't look too forced or awkward. He was surprised that Kensuke even noticed. He seemed to be too busy shouting things and waving his arms in the air to notice much about other people. Thank you, Kensuke, ma'am. No problemo, Naruto-kun. Kensuke grinned, not a hint of awkwardness about his expression, and Naruto couldn't help but feel jealous about the ease with which he could display his emotions to others. The bowls were set down on the table. Well, tuck in then, boys, Taihei smiled, gesturing at the food. Where was Naruki? 10 minutes into the meal, and a fair few bowls of ramen later, there was a knock at the door. Taihei stood up. I'll go get it, be right back. The sound of a door being opened, and then a squeal of delight, then rapid footsteps, and a figure launched itself at Izumi, Taihei's wife. Aiza-chan. Kensuke-kun. Kensuke was then glomped by the speeding figure. Hi, Auntie Naruki. It was more than obvious where Kensuke got his hyper-personality from. And whose? Deep brown eyes met with cerulean blue, and various emotions flickered through the brown eyes at 1,000,000 miles an hour, before Naruto was knocked to the floor by a well-aimed glomp from Tora. Naruto! Everybody watched as their guest was smothered by Naruki's suffocating glomps. Naruki-chan? I think you're suffocating the guest. Taihei pointed out. Tora finally let go, a smile plastered over her face, looking like an older version of Kensuke. How do you know, Naruto? Kensuke asked his aunt. Well, as she smiled and scratched the back of her head, long story far too long. Well, it's pretty early yet, Taihei started, but he was cut off by his sister. And miss out asking what's happened in my lovely family's life? But her fingers told a different story. Anbu hand code, it was the foundation of all Anbu missions. You couldn't run through a mission brief just before killing someone and alert them to your presence. Dash afterwards you have some explaining to do. Naruto sighed. Dash I look forward to it, Tora. Dash if you don't I will hunt you down this time, Kitsune. The meal passed without incident. It was late now, around 10. Kensuke yawned. I think it's time for bed for some people. Taihei remarked, his eyes also sagging slightly with fatigue. Obviously Kensuke was a handful. Kensuke protested a little before he was forced to bed by Izumi. Sorry, Naruto-kun, but we're going to bed now. Naruto stood. Thank you for inviting me, he bowed. Thank you for being so polite, Naruto-kun. Taihei smiled. Feel free to come again whenever you like. Are you staying in Muto? Taihei asked his sister. Sorry, Taihei-kun. She grinned. I got an important mission early tomorrow, from the Hokage himself. Ashamed, Taihei shrugged. Kensuke really misses you when you're gone. He's a ninja now, he can deal with it. Izumi and Kensuke had disappeared, leaving only Naruto, Taihei and Naruki. Shall I walk you home, Naruto-kun? Taihei asked, obviously completely unaware that Naruto could take care of himself. It's alright, brother, I'm going that way. I can take him for you. Naruki offered, embraced her, placing a single kiss on her forehead. Come back safely. So how've you been, Naru? He shrugged, then stretched his hands out in front of him. Bored? I see you're still in Anbu. Yeah, there's not else much now, especially after I got promoted. Naruto looked up, a hint of surprise flashing across his face. A promotion? You are now looking at Toritaishi. She bowed, flourishing her arms wildly, a huge grin plastered across her face. Naruto smiled, chuckling a little as he clapped slowly. A squad captain? Well done, Tora. I took a lot longer than I thought it would. It only took you a year to be promoted, Kitsune. She stuck her tongue out at the young blonde. I had extra help. She raised an eyebrow. You just had good teachers, that's nothing special. Naruto's head wilted, his eyes, once happy, looked pitifully lost. Maybe, but after merging with the Kyuubi he trailed off. There was a long awkward silence, filled by the footfalls of the two, as they walked side by side, down the dark, empty streets of Konoha. Taihei seemed pretty worried about you, Naruto pointed out, breaking the awkward silence. He heard about my promotion a few weeks ago, she sighed. He's a pacifist, and he gets worried about all the fighting I do. Naruto nodded. I remember him fussing over you when we got back from the mission to IWA, he acted like you were about 10. She blushed and laughed. I remember that. I'm just so glad nobody else was there to see that. My reputation as a badass Anbu would have crumbled to dust that day. She turned her attention back to her companion. Come on. Lighten up a little, you know? She waved her hands in the air, and Naruto knew that Kensuke had gotten his personality from his rather erratic "and you're so gloomy sometimes," she pouted, you smile, but most of the time you don't mean it. Do I have to mean it? He asked, a rueful smile flickering across his face. She looked shocked. Even Kitsune knew when to kick back and have a good time. Naruto-kun. Remember the party? She laughed. Ah, Kitsune, it was awesome. Remember? She began to laugh, but stopped, trailing off into silence after she realized she was laughing alone. Please. Naruto had stopped walking, just staring at the floor, refusing to meet her eyes. Never call me that again. His voice was like reinforced steel. Tora stopped walking as well, her usually ecstatic eyes were half closed in pain. Sema Mason. Naruto. Neither moved, nor made any attempts to break the awkward silence. So this is what it's like now, Naruki thought sadly. Is what he said really true? The biting wind whistled down the narrow empty street, breaking the depressed trance both of them were immersed in. So you've got a big mission tomorrow, Naruto started. Wanna tell me the details? Tora chuckled, the moment before disappearing in an instant, as if it had never existed. You know it's against the rules. Naruto grinned. Well, it's an S-rank secret. Tora chuckled. Apparently she checked the street, looking both left and right to check it was safe, and that nobody was eavesdropping on their conversation. Once she was happy that there was nobody listening, she whispered. Orochimaru has been sighted, around Otogekure. I see. Naruto nodded with clenched fists. Well, let's hope somebody at least manages to kill that snake. The mission is recon only, key Naruto. She sighed miserably. It was common knowledge amongst the Anbu that Naruto had promised to be the one to kill the snake Sennin. There were only a few people who knew the reason why, and even less truly understood why he wanted to kill the man with his own 2 hands. Shame. Naruto breathed, his breath hanging momentarily in the air before dissipating. You harbor too much hate. Tora cautioned in a worried tone. You want peace, but... I know. Hardened blue eyes met worried brown. I can handle it. What is the point of hating someone just because they think differently from you? She growled, unconsciously clenching her fists. You approve of what that thing has done? Naruto yelled. You agree with senseless pain and torture for a selfish cause? Tora stepped backwards, surprised at the amount of hate in the boy's voice, each word like a blade. Then perhaps you shouldn't stay here. He roared. Perhaps you should run off to that snake you seem to be protecting. Naruto, please. The blood was thundering in his ears. All he could see was her lips moving, and her eyes beginning to fill with tears. Make it stop. She was crying now. What was he even saying to her? He couldn't tell. Please make it stop. Why wasn't she leaving already? Why was she still there? Please. She was moving towards him now. She should have been afraid, but there was no hint of fear in those eyes. Make me stop. It was a whisper, but to his ears it was a shout. He forced his eyes shut. He didn't want her pity, or her forgiveness, as he deserved either. Warmth. It's okay, Naruto-kun. She whispered in his ear, it's okay. He felt the walls in his mind crumble as he sank to his knees in silence, yet he didn't even shed a single tear. The Chunin exams? Already? Naruto raised an eyebrow in Kakashi's direction, surprised. Well. Naruto laughed, eyes sparkling momentarily, making them an even more vibrant blue than they usually were. See? I told you that you liked them. The younger man seemed so much more relaxed than usual, more prone to rare smiles and rarer laughter. Do you think they can do it, Naruto? I've never seen them train, so I wouldn't know. Well, there's a solution to that. Train with them. Naruto's eyes took a more serious light with them. It was a wistful whisper. It wouldn't do them any harm, Kakashi shrugged, and it won't do you any either. Should I? If I help them all, there's less chance that they will die on the battlefield. From what his senpai had told him, they were all still a bit rough around the edges. Kensuke needed more work on his ninjutsu, which was, to put it nicely, in dire need of attention. Sakura, she had good intellect, when she wasn't focusing on the Uchiha, but everything else needed work. The Uchiha, his taijutsu style, needed perfecting, and Naruto had experience with fighting and exploiting the flaws of the basic Uchiha style, but the blonde sighed, his shoulders drooping in defeat. Maybe. The silver-haired Jounin smiled. There's a training session tomorrow morning, at 8 o'clock, training ground 7. Naruto nodded. Had he got himself into? He shut the door, wincing as the sunlight shone a bit too brightly in his half-asleep eyes. 7:50 a.m. Of course Kakashi wouldn't be there until 10 a.m. at the earliest, but he was sure the lack of a sensei wouldn't stop Team 7 from training. Hey Naruto! He turned, vaguely surprised that there was anyone passing his house so early that knew him. Kakashi-sensei told me you were coming to watch us train, Kensuke shouted, waving an arm in greeting. Finally decide to become a ninja? Yes, something like that. A curious brown box followed close behind Kensuke, stopping every time the boy did. Well, you got something following you there, Naruto said, pointing at the stalker box. The box exploded with a cloud of bright, multicolored smoke. You got us. Cough. From inside the box emerged 3 figures. One of them was unmistakably Konohamaru, the second a girl with long red pigtails that stood up at odd angles and rosy cheeks, the third, a sickly boy with a runny nose. They've been following me the whole way, Kensuke sighed overdramatically. And cough, I bet you didn't see us, cough, huh? Konohamaru coughed. Kensuke couldn't reply to that. Hey, what's going on, guys? An undeniably female voice asked. Oh hey Sakura, Naruto greeted. The girl smiled pleasantly back at him, but when Kensuke raised a hand in greeting, shut it. Naruto felt for the kid as his face fell, the happy grin replaced by an unhappy frown. So boss. Konohamaru turned to Kensuke. You said you'd play ninja with us. Kensuke rubbed the back of his head. I did. Yeah. The snotty-nosed boy yelled. An evil aura surrounded Sakura, and her eyes flashed evilly. Play ninja? She raised a fist and poor Kensuke flinched. That's so pathetic. Her fist flew towards the boy. Boss. Let's run for it. The monster's gone crazy. Konohamaru yelled, seeing it all as a game. That set the pinkhead right off the wall. Why you come back here? She began to chase the 4, her fists raised ready to blast them to oblivion, and then Konohamaru hit something tall and black, and young boy was lifted into the air. That hurt, punk. Which way had they gone? In their mad dash for survival, Naruto had lost track of which way the 5 had here? Nope, Kensuke was close, he could hear him yelling, and Konohamaru too. Nothing much for it then. Naruto put on an impressive amount of speed, suddenly turning from a running boy into a speeding. But who were they? You leave shinobi are all wimps. He looked at the darkly dressed boy that held the Sandame's grandson, and a quick glimpse at the Hataite classed him as a genin. From him stood a girl dressed in purple, her hair ties up in spiky ponytails. Had there been one more boy there, Naruto could have safely classified them as the children of the current Kazekage of Suna. Konohamaru! The 2 other children yelled, unable to do anything due to the fright they felt, keeping their feet locked to despair. At glance at Sakura and Kensuke, they too were locked in place, only able to watch as Konohamaru dangled helplessly in the tall boy's grip. And you're all annoying from this distance. Naruto could see the sinister smile that covered the older boy's face. And I just want to break you in half. Just a few more seconds, Konohamaru. Naruto thought silently to himself. Even if it does show me up, it was bound to happen eventually, and this Suna nin is serious. First I'll take care of this one. He pulled back a fist, and then I'll take care of the O. The Sunanin was pushed a pace backward, a hand unconsciously going to his bleeding lip. Konohamaru scrambled back towards the group. Naruto! Sakura yelled, now aware of who had saved the younger boy. There's Shinobi Naruto! Come back, Kensuke yelled, his eyes wide, not with excitement or happiness, but fear. You should listen to them, you know, punk. The purple markings on the boy's face made his stare twisted. Uzumaki Naruto. Why do I want to know your name? The blonde shrugged. It's customary for the loser to know who beat him. The Sunanin laughed. The name's Sabaka no Kankuro. So he is one of the Kazekage's children. Kankuro looked down at the blonde boy, leaning in closer to whisper in the smaller boy's ear. And I'm a shinobi. Well, Naruto whispered back. Ever hear of the piercing wind? Naruto wished he could see the look that he knew crossed the Sabaka's face. Piercing wind, it had been his Anbu moniker, but he had earned it in Sunagakure, in a SS rank mission to assassinate the head of the Suna Anbu, Yaramaki. Naruto whispered, his hand seal almost unseen. Kankuro began to cough, clutching at his throat, stepping backwards towards where his sister, Temari no Sabaku, stood, a look of concern on her face. Naruto turned to his right, smiling at the red head who hung from a tree branch. Gaara no Sabaku. He nodded and turned towards Sakura and Kensuke. Sasuke Uchiha stayed where he was on the branch of the tree, rock poised for throwing. Had that been a hand seal Naruto had used? Gaara reappeared in a swirl of sand next to his siblings. You're an embarrassment to the village, Kankuro, the redhead said, his voice devoid of any emotion but hate. You were defeated by a civilian. Naruto suddenly saw the danger if Gaara found out that Kankuro was under a genjutsu. Forming the seals discreetly, he whispered Kai. Softly. Kankuro coughed once more, before taking in what felt to him like his first clean breath. We'll be going now, Gaara said quietly. Wait. Sakura yelled, do you have permission to enter the village? Of course, Temari laughed. Don't you know what's happening? Well, Kensuke started. Of course, the Chunin exams. Naruto thought Kakashi hasn't told them about it. It's the Chunin exams, punk, Kankuro told them, leering at the younger genin. Chunin? Exams? Kensuke turned to Sakura. Do you know what it is, Sakura-chan? For once the pinkette didn't hit him. Temari grinned at her brother. They have no clue. Turning back to the group, she sneered, we'll see you there. Better hope you're not against us. Gaara stood silently, staring, but not at either of the genin. He was staring directly at Naruto. The Ichibi, Shikaka. Naruto sighed. The bloodlust is just far too obvious. The sand sibling turned and began to walk away, without so much as even a farewell. Wait! Sasuke shouted, jumping down from his previous perch. Your name? Who, me? Temari blushed deeply. Well, I'm not you. Sasuke cut off, then pointed at the red-head him. Sabaka no Gaara. The boy with the ringed eyes replied. And you? Uchiha Sasuke. The Konohamaru Corps had gone home, and Team 7 was lounging around the training ground waiting for their sensei. Sasuke wouldn't stop staring at him now. Even when Naruto looked up, he refused to make eye contact. Stop looking at me. The Uchiha kept staring. Stop staring. The Uchiha blinked, and Naruto relaxed a little. What's the deal, Kakashi-senpai? 11:10. The Uchiha got up and walked over. Can I talk to you a moment, please, Uzumaki? Naruto got to his feet. Sure, Uchiha. Over there. Sasuke pointed to the woods privately. Why, Uchiha? Naruto fluttered his eyelashes suggestively. I never knew you liked me like that. Get serious. Sure. What was that back there? The Uchiha asked, concern visible in his slate-gray eyes. What the joke? Naruto laughed good-naturedly. It was only a joke, Uchiha. No, back when you confronted the Sunanin. What about it? Naruto asked, outwardly. His face only showed puzzlement, but inside his head was working at 100 miles an hour. Damn all Uchihas and their goddamn intellect. Your hand, it looked like a hand seal for a genjutsu in A-rank genjutsu. Really? Naruto frowned. I don't remember doing anything like that. Perhaps you didn't see right? He would give up the game eventually, but he would not let the Uchiha win this one, not now. HN. Now that's more like an Uchiha. I'll keep an eye on you, Uzumaki. He stalked off, leaving the blonde alone in the clearing. Sure you will. Sasuke. A grin crossed his face. Sure you will. He followed the Uchiha back to the training ground. This will be interesting. Where is he? Kensuke whined, plucking repeatedly at the grass by his feet. Team 7 and Naruto sat around the training ground, waiting for the perpetually late Jounin. Come on, senpai, I need to see what these kids can do. Naruto sat a little way from the genin, back rested against a nearby tree. He had to say, he was pretty surprised that the Uchiha wasn't training already with the amount of times he had come back from night patrol and come across the child training with Katon Jutsus. He remembered being vaguely impressed at the power of the jutsus the academy student had produced. Did Itachi-senpai ever teach him the dash? The Uchiha stood up abruptly, cutting the blonde's train of thought. Why should we wait for him? Sakura leapt to her feet, eager to agree with the dark-eyed boy. Yeah. Naruto resisted the temptation to roll his eyes. He was sure that if Sakura stood on her own 2 feet just once, she would be a more than proficient kunoichi. We should train, Kensuke added, pulling himself from the patch of ground where he had been sitting. But Sakura looked around the empty clearing. Perhaps ninjutsu would be a bit too much. If anyone got too badly hurt, Naruto gained a little more respect for the apparently airheaded genin. HN the Uchiha was not amused. If I didn't know any better. Naruto grinned. I would have thought the Uchiha was annoyed. So taijutsu then? Kensuke asked, looking from Sasuke to Sakura. I suppose the Uchiha shrugged. Naruto saw the flicker of fear in Sakura's eyes. So I guess taijutsu isn't a strong point for her. Sakura. He called, come over here and explain what they're doing. She smiled, obviously grateful for the excuse to sit out, and ran towards the tree, sitting in the grass next to Naruto. Well, taijutsu is hand-to-hand combat. He drowned her out, nodding every so often if he needed to. And Kensuke uses a style called Kabushi no Mai. Naruto smiled. So Tora-chan had taught Kensuke her own style? It couldn't have been better. And Sasuke-kun, she trailed off, a small frown on her face. I don't know, but it will beat Kensuke. The blonde sighed, but a smile was still on his. Were problems, but they would be easy to iron out. He understood why Kakashi had passed the team. Ready? Kensuke asked, innocent eyes staring in the Uchiha's direction. I should ask you the same thing. Kensuke grinned, then sliding his right foot into stance, bringing his hands up into a defensive position. The Uchiha stood, staring. Sighing, Kensuke rolled his eyes. Do you ever strike the first blow, Sasuke? Kensuke covered the ground between them in a few seconds, fist poised ready for striking. The Uchiha dodged to his left, avoiding the aimed fist with ease, before returning a blow of his own to Kensuke's rib. The younger of the two boys regained his breath, before sliding his foot back. Still not good enough. Kensuke is a proficient taijutsu user. His attacks are usually well aimed. Kakashi had sighed. His style is lacking something. He added it to his mental list of things to do, but didn't take his eyes off the two genin. There was something that just said that not everything was being shown. The Uchiha ran towards the other boy, and Naruto winced in pain as the Uchiha's fist connected, followed by a foot, and then a roundhouse kick that sent Kensuke flying to the ground. Spitting blood, Kensuke got back to his feet. It's getting a bit rough for genin, isn't it? Kensuke forward, the smaller boy connected a hit, but the next was blocked by an annoyed-looking Uchiha, who sent the boy sprawling for the third time. The blonde under the tree realized there were two problems. One was Kensuke. He was good at the style, but it had been invented for an Anbu by an Anbu, not for a genin who didn't have enough speed or power to complete the attacks. Perhaps he could teach Kensuke a different way to use the style. The second was the Uchiha. Did people just let him win? It made his fists itch just thinking about it. He hissed as Kensuke missed a valuable opening in Sasuke's defense, and was surprised when Sakura hissed too. She saw it? Kensuke laid back, stretching his bruised and battered limbs out on the grass. So you enjoyed it, Naruto? The boy asked the blonde. Yeah, it was cool. Sasuke was stood still, waiting for their sensei to arrive. Naruto frowned. Teamwork was important. Why did the Uchiha never join in? You remember Aunt Naruki? He turned back to Kensuke, wondering where this conversation was going. She told me about the team she heard of. He lowered his voice to a whisper in Anbu. Oh no, Tora-chan, please say, Naruto thought. Kensuke nodded sagely, like it was a top-secret matter. Go on, Naruto said, not liking the turn the conversation had taken. Well, she told me about a young boy who was one of the elite. He looked left and right, Kitsune. Tora-chan, you are so dead. And he was a really good ninja. Rumor has it that he was next in line to be Hokage, and then he disappeared. Does anyone know what happened? Sakura asked, interested. Aunt Naruki said that he lives in Konoha still but as a normal civilian. He left? Kensuke nodded. Obasan said that Kitsune was the best she had ever seen and Obasan is good. Kitsune, Sasuke whispered, and Naruto's ears pricked up. I think I met him once. You did? Oh wow, Sasuke-kun. You're so cool. Kensuke looked a little deflated. When did you meet him, Uchiha? Naruto asked, hoping that the Uchiha wouldn't notice the edge to his voice. Why should you care? Naruto shrugged, looking away, just interested. There was a silence. He knew my brother, I think. He hoped the genin wouldn't press the topic any further if the Uchiha remembered too much. Sure, he had planned to give up the game at some point, but if the wrong people knew he was alive, it could end up very badly for a lot of people, not just for him. What was he like, Sasuke-kun? I don't really remember. He had a white mask, with he ran 4 fingers down the center of his face, 4 red stripes down the middle, and the usual Anbu uniform. I remember finding it odd that he was the same height as me. Curse all Uchihas. Naruto growled. He was the same height? Kensuke frowned, wincing as the expression caused a bruise on his chin to flare up in pain. So was he just short, or was he young? Like really, really young? The genin sat and or stood respectively, wondering silently about the identity of Kitsune, whilst Naruto sat, fuming. Not that you would have guessed from his expression. Yo! Kakashi winced, as he looked into 2 murderous cerulean blue eyes. This is not going to end well. You're late! Kensuke and Sakura yelled, pointing accusing fingers at the extremely late sensei. I'll be more than late when Naruto is through, Kakashi thought. The silver-haired jounin rubbed the back of his head. I got lost on the road of life. The 3 genin deadpanned. Sure, sensei. Kensuke sighed. Sure. The midday heat was stifling, but Team 7 had just rested under the shade of the trees. Do you know about Kitsune, Kakashi-sensei? Kensuke asked. Naruto suppressed a groan. What had the kid got against him? Well, I met him a few times, the older man admitted. Really, what was he like? Sakura asked, and Naruto noticed that Sasuke also sat up a little taller. Well, he was certainly good at what he did. But what did he look like, sensei? Kensuke interrupted. None of us know. Naruto wanted the earth to open up and swallow him. What is with these kids and their obsession? I don't know either. I only saw him when he was very young. Kakashi shrugged. He is sure to have changed by now. Naruto let his breath out, completely unaware he had been holding it. How old would he be now then? Sasuke asked, surprising the other members of Team 7. He would be your age. What? All 3 members turned to Kakashi in shock. Our age? The jounin nodded. He was Anbu before we even joined the academy? Kakashi nodded again. Does anyone know where he is? Sakura asked. He still lives in Konoha apparently. Kakashi shrugged. Not many people know where. Do you? Sasuke said in words what the other 2 genin were thinking, or on the verge of saying. Well, the jounin looked over at Naruto, who was glaring like a sharp battle-ready kunai. But the copy nin carried on as if nothing was wrong. Some say that he hangs around in the forest of death every full moon, but that's just old gossip. Naruto groaned as he realized that each of the genin had the full intention of going to see if the rumor was true. The full moon was tomorrow. Yet the forest of death was dangerous to genin. Hell, even most jounin were at risk from some of the things that inhabited that deadly forest. Naruto waited until the genin had gone home in order to vent his frustration. Why the hell'd you do that? Naruto yelled, his cerulean eyes no longer calm, but like a thrashing river, fists clenched. All memories of the time. They need training, what better way? He said offhandedly, Ika book open, scanning pages. Look at me when I'm speaking to you. The blonde hissed, wrenching the book from the jounin's grasp, throwing it to the floor. Why should I? The silver-haired jounin snapped, for once losing his legendary indifference. Grey like steel, you're a nobody. By your own choice. The 2 stood silently, facing each. Tension was almost palpable, and Kakashi had a feeling that it wouldn't be long before blows were traded. He had absolutely no desire to test out Naruto's skills after 2 years of withdrawal from the Black Ops, since the blonde boy could have easily beaten him before. Sighing, he slouched. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. And he really was. No, it's alright, it was silly of me to overact, senpai. The blonde had his head in his hands. Kakashi crouched and grabbed the orange-bound book from its precarious position on the ground by their feet, placing it back in his kunai pouch, and then drew something out. Naruto's breath hitched in his throat. That? It's only for a night, but you can be Kitsune again, Kakashi said quietly. It's nothing official, no missions, just. But all Naruto could hear was his heart pounding as he reached out for the all-too-familiar Anbu mask. 4 red lines ran down vertically from forehead to chin. Kitsune. The Hokage gave it to me, Kakashi explained as Naruto took the mask from his outstretched fingers. He told me he remembered a time when you said that you would never take it off. I said that? I suppose I did. He ran his fingers down the red stripes. There were too many memories he had forced himself to forget related to the mask. The porcelain surface was still as smooth as it had ever been, looking almost as clean as when he had first seen it, but a small fracture on the bottom length of the mask convinced him it was the original. The last time he had seen this, it had been discarded at the feet of the Sandaime, and its clean white surface had been covered with drying blood. Flipping it over, he traced the faint lettering on the inside. From Tora, Yama, Inu and Kei, good luck in Anbu Kitsune. The faces flashed through his mind as his hands passed over each of the names. Kei, Naruto doubted he would ever see his face again. Yama would never be teased by Tora again. Inu, but he was no longer Inu. Kakashi had moved on with his life. Tora was still Tora, the last of the 4, her smile still as vibrant, her teasing just as present as they ever were. Everyone had moved on. Why hadn't he? Had he been so focused on forgetting the past he had become a part of it? Just once he whispered, his eyes shutting wearily, his hand dropping to his side. Without him, the genin could die in that forest. He hadn't known any of them for that long, yet somehow they had just inserted themselves into his life. Twisting on his heels, he left the silver-haired Jounin alone in the training ground. Kakashi turned, facing the Hokage monument, but instead of looking at the usual face, he turned to the Sandaime. See, I told you he would take it back. The Hokage had heard about Naruto's life since he had left the Black Ops, and had asked Kakashi help him. He hoped that it had at least made a little difference. He stared at it. It stared back. It was a never-ending staring competition. On the bed next to the ever-staring mask, lay his ninjato. It had been there when he had got back home from the training ground, placed on top of his sheets, gleaming like it had just been cleaned. He hadn't touched it yet, it had stayed where it had been set down. Why am I doing this? He thought wearily, resisting the urge to curl up and forget anything and everything that had happened that day. Why am I going back to the life I left? He had no answer, not yet. Next to it laid an old-issue Anbu uniform, like the type he used to wear, but significantly bigger than the last. 2 years was long enough to grow out of something. More than long enough. There were other things on his mind racing through at the speed of light. I might not be any help after 2 years. Things are forgotten easily. With that thought, an uncomfortable amount of fear ran through him, causing him to clench his eyes shut and breathe out sharply. I won't let them die. He would have to train. Just to see. Just to see if he could help them. They needed to be trained, they needed to survive the Chunin exams. He would not let them die. The rustle of the uniform was nearly painful, as he put it on, yet soothing, almost hypnotic, others might have said. The ninjato was firmly placed on his back, the hilt over his right shoulder, its weight as comforting as the sound of the uniform. He stood there for a while, staring at the unemotional, striped mask in his hands, the ties hanging limply in his grasp. Doubts ran through his head. Suspicions. Second thoughts. What if the Hokage forced him to rejoin the Black Ops? What if that day repeated itself? His knuckles turned white as his fingers dug into the white porcelain. He knew then that he would never rejoin Anbu. It would destroy what little sanity he had managed to grab a hold of. But I won't let them die, he whispered, placing the cool mask over his face. He let out a deep breath. In a blink he was gone. The window swung on its hinges as if seeing the boy off, waving a forlorn goodbye. Kitsune. It was so easy to fall back into that character, even if he was as much Kitsune as Kitsune was him. Yet Kitsune was the ever-alert, stoic Anbu. Naruto was the boy who lived on his own in his own apartment. They were different people. The wind rushed past as he ran along the rooftops, racing the other shinobi that used the highway. He had missed this, the freedom to be whatever he wanted. Casting a glance around, he noticed there was a distinct lack of Anbu patrolling the rooftops. Kitsune shrugged. The rules were sure to have changed in the time he had left. Now that he was back, he would have to look them up. He was currently heading west towards the larger, unused training grounds. Training Ground 1. It was one of the largest, but also the furthest from Konoha, in case he practiced anything too drastic. He would have to sneak through the other training grounds to get there. The taller buildings were replaced by smaller houses, probably a civilian quarter. The wind carried an interesting scent, like 1,000 flowers. He peered down into the street, suddenly curious where the otherworldly smell was coming from. Yamanaka Flower Shop. As in Yamanaka Inoichi? He suppressed a laugh. The last time he had seen Inoichi was when the blonde jounin had been interrogating a man suspected of being an IWA spy. It had taken the Yamanaka about 3 minutes to render the IWA knee into a jittering pile, having spilled his life story to the blonde jounin, and revealed his purpose in Konoha. A man like that owned a flower shop? He stopped for a moment. Kitsune sat on the edge, his feet dangling over the rooftop. 13 years and he had never seen this street before. There were only a few people on the street, going about their own business, but 4 figures caught his attention. Shikamaru sighed. Troublesome. Next to him, Chuji was busy emptying the 1,000th bag of chips, not even offering any to his teammates. Not that they really cared. Asuma took a drag of his perpetually present cigarette, the smell of smoke lingering around him. Ino wrinkled her nose. Sensei. She wafted a hand in front of her, in a vain attempt to clear the haze of smoke. The smell stays in my hair for days. The blonde whined. The bearded jounin shrugged. Chuji finished the packet he had been eating and pulled out the next packet, then continued to eat. Shikamaru sighed again. It had been a long day. He had been told about their nomination for the Chunin exams, trained a bit, ignored Ino and stared at clouds. And now they were finished, and like they did every other day, walk Ino back to the flower shop. Something caught his eye. He looked up to the rooftops. There was a tiny flicker of movement. He was sure that the tiny flicker he had seen had been a foot. He glanced back at his team, wondering if they had seen it too. Ino was too busy complaining about everything, and Chuji was too busy doing what he always did, eat. But Asuma was also looking at the rooftop, but what puzzled Shikamaru was the faint smile on his lips. What's going on? Asuma looked down in surprise, and then smiled at Shikamaru's expression. It would be too troublesome, believe me, Shikamaru. So there is something going on, but what? The Nara sighed again, digging his hands deep into his pockets. At least Ino was home now. How troublesome. So that had been one of the other genin teams? Kitsune was already in Training Ground 3, having to pass through this one and Training Ground 2 to get where he wanted to go. Training Ground 3 was an area of dense woodland, usually used by the academy for their older students, and occasionally the odd genin team. Some people said it was where the Shodain trained. Not that Kitsune believed any of it, but he supposed it was a nice thought. He imagined that if the Shodain had practiced here, the Mokuton user would have liked the trees. Talking of the trees, they were much closer now than they had been when he had first entered the training ground, making hopping from tree branch to tree branch increasingly more difficult. He just hoped he didn't slip, because that would just be plain embarrassing. He was glad that the training ground was smaller than most, but the limited vision with the mask firmly in place was beginning to bug him. He couldn't remember if it had annoyed him before, or if it had just never bothered him. At least the forest would end. Then he remembered what Training Ground 2 was. And Kitsune had a horrible feeling that the genin would run him ragged around the forest of death tomorrow evening. Yes, he would have a nice, possibly painful conversation with his senpai after this was all over. And Tora-chan as well, for giving Kensuke the goddamn idea. She kept running as fast as she could. It was all she could do to stay ahead of them. But even as she ran, her mind raced through all the tactics she could to defeat them. When she finally gave up on running away, or they finally caught up with her, she sensed someone in front of her before she actually saw him, sat above the forest floor on a tree branch ahead. Blinking, she realized that the figure sat in front of her was a Black Ops member. Hinata stopped, hoping that the Anbu hadn't noticed her yet. It was rare she ever got to see an Anbu member close up like this. She had always been fascinated by Anbu since a very young age, after she was saved by a Black Ops member after an attempted kidnap by a Kumonin. Her eyes traced the mane of sunshine yellow hair. And suddenly he turned. Startled cerulean blue eyes met startled lavender eyes. And then vanished. Hinata didn't move, even when Kiba and Shino found her. Damn it. Kitsune cursed. I stopped twice and get spotted by genin? If he had thought falling out of a tree was embarrassing, this was infinitely times worse. By genin. He mentally yelled at himself, slightly angered. He was now in the largest clearing of Training Ground 1, stood patiently still. The masked blonde sighed. There was nothing he could do about it now, plus, he had more important things on his mind. Tajukage Bunshin no Jutsu. The clearing was suddenly full of clones dressed up in Anbu gear, Kitsune mask on each and every one. He was remotely surprised that he could even use the technique after all this time. He was suddenly extremely grateful to the Sandaime for teaching him the jutsu. It would cut his training time by roughly half. Right, listen up. This is how it goes dash. Kitsune winced as all the clones dispersed, making his brain work overtime to remember everything they had relearned. An almost full moon hung over the clearing, bathing it a soft light, making the blonde feel even more exhausted. Perhaps he had overdone it just a little. Placing his ninjato back over his shoulder, he sighed. Less than 24 hours until he would have to play nanny to 3 unprepared genin. There was no way he was gonna last the night without soldier pills. He would have to pester his senpai for some later as soon as he managed to find the strength to get back to Konoha. I guess you overdid it, huh, Kitsune? You dash. He was cut off by a glomp. Kitsune flew backwards through the air, caught by surprise with the unannounced flying glomp, and then hit the floor, with an all-too-audible crunch. You look so cute, Kitsune-kun. Tora was completely oblivious to the amount of killing intent that was rolling off the smaller masked figure, too busy squealing in delight. Ah, look at you! It's so cute! Kitsune gritted his teeth, as it took all of his energy just to stay upright. There would be no way he could throw Tora off, he would just have to bear it until she finally got over seeing him. Which, knowing Tora, would be an unbelievable amount of time later. So why are you here, Tora-chan? Kitsune asked, after she had finally let him go. Well, were you following me? She laughed again. You're the insane one using bunshins to train. She stuck her tongue out at him and waggled her finger silly. And then he suddenly remembered. He groaned and flopped to the floor. Why didn't I remember earlier? He groaned. It would have saved me all this time. Naruki's specialty was a rare type of ninjutsu, similar to the Yamanaka technique, except it forced the victim to relieve their own memories, leaving them incapable to defend themselves during a battle. He could have just relieved his training memories, without all the exhaustion that came with the actual training. Well, she looked around the decimated clearing, the destroyed trees, scorched and crater-filled ground. Naruto looked up from his depressed huddle on the floor. She winked. I don't think you need my help with anything, Kitsune, but if you want to take a look. Tora left the sentence hanging, waiting for an answer from the worn-out boy in front of her. Please? Ninpu Senkato no Jutsu. The Sandaime laughed for the 1000th time that day. No, Naruto-kun. He leant down closer towards the tiny blonde and repositioned his hands, much to the boy's displeasure. See? If you get sloppy with your hand seals. Naruto scowled. I'll show you one day, Gigi. The blonde vowed. Of course, the old man yet again, but your hand slipped again. Naruto's scowl deepened. Kitsune-kun, you were so adorable. Tora squealed. Kitsune scowled, much like his younger, 3-year-old self. I don't think this will get us anywhere. I can remember this stuff. Sposport, Tora pouted. Right, Gaki, chakra control. Jiraiya sat in front of a still tiny Naruto. Naruki, Kitsune growled. But. He sent her a death glare, and she sighed. Fine, have it your way, almighty master. The Sandaime reached for a smallish black box, covered in black velvet, and handed it to the serious-looking blonde-haired boy in front of him. Go on, open it. Naruto carefully opened the box, peering inside, wondering about the mysterious contents. He reached in and pulled out a stark white Anbu mask, for red stripes running from forehead to chin. Well done, Naruto-kun. The Hokage laughed. You're now a part of Anbu. Naruto looked up suddenly, his previous somber demeanor all but vanished, huge grin covering his face. Thanks, Gigi. I'll never take it off. An Anbu with a dog mask appeared at the Hokage's side. This is Inu. The Hokage motioned. He will be your mentor for the next year. Inu removed his porcelain mask and smiled kindly at the blonde, who smiled nervously back. I'm Inu. He held out a hand, feeling a little stupid introducing himself again, after the Hokage had already introduced him, but he didn't know how to act around children. Whatever he had done, though, had been the right thing to do. The small blonde grabbed the older teen's hand, and smile grew. Kitsune, the next Hokage. Tora turned to the blonde, who was still sat in the dirt next to her, concerned. It's all right, he smiled, nothing like the childish grin he had worn in times past, but a weary, grief-ridden smile, a washout. Perhaps send it forward a couple of years. #. Our mission is this. Case started, carefully making sure each member of his team heard the mission brief, In an S-class mission, it was vital we need to retrieve a scroll stolen from Konoha a few hours ago. We know that it is traveling southeast in a trading caravan heading for the borders of Kaze no Kuni. Kitsune nodded. He had been on many missions by now. Very little of the carefree child from 3 years ago was left. Kei continued. We are to retrieve the scroll. Do not hesitate to kill any that get in the way of your mission. Hi! 2 members of the group stood, but the third remained crouched next to Kei. Does that mean we try to avoid contact at all costs, senpai? Neither spoke. There was only silence, broken by birdsong every so often. It was known between them that neither liked mindless violence. They did what they were told, and that was it. One stood up and began to walk towards the other 2. Kitsune? The still crouching boy stood up and walked over to the blonde, then handed him something. A small tightly bound scroll. It's a few katan techniques I thought you might like. Kei shrugged. You don't have to learn them if you don't want. Arigato, senpai. Kitsune scanned the scroll before putting it into the pocket of his uniform. Anything useful? Tora asked, beginning to think it might have been a bad idea. She didn't want to drag it out any longer. Kitsune nodded. He had forgotten about that scroll. A little bit, but he shrugged his shoulders a little. I need to rest. Tora nodded. She had known the boy had pushed himself further than he should have. Come on. She held out a hand to pull the boy off the ground. I'll take you home. A few seconds later, the near-destroyed clearing was empty. Sakura clutched at her skirt, hoping that the 2 boys in front of her didn't notice how she lagged behind slightly. Those 2 were always leaving her behind. A twig snapped. What was that? She spun to her right, her heart pounding rapidly. Is something wrong, Sakura-chan? Kensuke had stopped and turned back towards her. Sasuke had kept on walking. And nothing. I thought I heard something over there. She gestured feebly to her right, her hand shaking. He turned to where the pinkette had pointed, and when he was sure there was nothing there, turned back to her. Whatever it was, it's gone now. He smiled. And we better catch up to Sasuke. He might just find Kitsune without us. She bit her lip, and then followed after her teammates. Where are those 2? Both Kensuke and Sakura had stopped further back, and the fact that they hadn't reappeared had begun to annoy the Uchiha. Why did he have to be on a team like this? How would he ever gain enough power to kill his brother if his team might as well have stayed in the academy? Sasuke sighed as he heard the noisy footfalls of his 2 teammates approaching. At this rate, they would never find Kitsune, if Kakashi had even been telling the truth. The thing about the once every full moon. How much more cliché could you get? His sensei was up to something if only he knew what. Hey Sasuke-kun! Sakura yelled. Wait up! The Uchiha sighed. I had to get stuck on a team like this. Kitsune hopped onto the next branch, keeping a watchful eye on the 3. So far there had been nothing out of the usual, not anything to be worried about anyway. The forest hadn't changed much from the last time he was here, the same old boring trees, plants and dirt. Looking at it now, the Forest of Death didn't seem a very suitable name. He wondered why the genin even wanted to find him. What did they want from him? The masked blonde shook his head slightly, clearing his thoughts. I really am out of practice, however much I try to ignore the fact. One night of training and a few memories wouldn't be enough to bring back everything he had forgotten. He would have to retrain. He would have to go there and pick up his old kit. He hadn't been there since. A noise. He glanced left to right, but he felt no other presence other than the 3 genin on the forest floor below him. But even if he was out of practice, the blonde kept his mind trained to the task at hand. You know, you really should lighten up a bit. The dark-haired man glared at the young redhead, itching to strangle the other man, or at least shut him up for once. It's patrol duty, not a frickin' picnic, Shinku, he retorted, hoping the young man would finally shut up. The redhead, Shinku, pouted. But dash! He began to whine. Shut up. Shut up. Shinku shrank back, eyes suddenly fearful, and his mouth, for once, clamped shut. The dark-haired man stood, grabbing his katana from where it rested against the post. Stay here. He hissed furiously. I'm going to patrol the area. He stalked off into the inky black forest. Kitsune could feel the effect of the pills begin to wear off, and shrugged his shoulders to keep off the ache. He hoped Team 7 would give up soon, but he had his doubts. He guessed that Kensuke wanted to find Kitsune because he knew his aunt, Sasuke probably wanted to find Kitsune because he knew Itachi, and Sakura wanted to find Kitsune because everybody else wanted to. If he ever got around to helping Team 7, he knew exactly what he would help them with. Another sigh. A penny for every time he sighed and he would be rich, not that he didn't have enough money. He had an account, and it held a lot more than one might expect when you looked at his tiny, rather shabby-looking house. Since that day he had never touched it, since all the money there had been earned on missions, it was dirty money. It was money covered in blood. Jiraiya had argued long and hard with the boy to use the money, but in the end he had given up. He had said that even his father had never been as stubborn. So Jiraiya let him earn money via his job at the Boost. Muffled footsteps. The genin? No, they were to his right now, and the noise had come from his left. He dropped off the branch and landed without a sound on the forest floor. Only shinobi came into the forest of death. Why would they have the need to suppress their chakra so low that he didn't notice it while he was distracted? Or perhaps your skills have dulled, not likely, he hadn't forgotten simple stuff like that. Whoever it was, they were suppressing their chakra levels incredibly low. He crept silently towards the faint sound of footsteps. They were slowly moving away from him towards the genin. Kitsune cursed. He had thought that it would have been a relatively easy job, but cursing once more, he picked up the pace, following the direction of the stranger's footsteps. Chances could be it was just an Anbu or Jounin on patrol, but he couldn't take that chance. Kensuke. The boy stopped just behind Sasuke, a quizzical look on his face. Sakura stood close behind, her jade eyes full of fear. The forest of death was no walk in the park. Had the Uchiha seen something? Kensuke nodded, eyes shifting left and right, glancing into the shadows that surrounded them. They would find Kitsune, there was no going back now. A figure, silhouetted in the silvery shadows of the full moon, and a brief moment of déjà vu hit Kitsune. He was sure he had seen this moment before, but he shook the thought clear. One thing was clear, the figure in front of him was not a Konoha shinobi. His Hittite had a musical symbol, shuriken poised for throwing. Aimed at the genin. Get down! Sasuke yelled, forcing both Kensuke and Sakura sprawling to the ground as they heard the sound of throwing stars flying past overhead. Sakura whimpered. The Uchiha leapt up, running straight for the direction from which the shuriken had been thrown, a kunai already in hand. Kensuke called him back. It was too reckless, but Sasuke didn't want to hear it. He didn't need their help. The Uchiha's kunai flew off into the bushes recklessly, followed by Katon Jutsu. Damn it, Uchiha! A voice growled from the darkness, and Sasuke faltered. A body flew out of the shadows, flying towards the paralyzed genin. Kensuke, strangely, was the first to react. Move! All three ducked as the body flew over their heads, colliding with a huge, overgrown tree behind them, before collapsing awkwardly to the ground. Wincing Kitsune got to his feet, dodging shuriken that embedded themselves in the bark where his heart had been mere seconds before. The Otonin stepped into the light, grinning ferally at the three genin, before his attention turned back to Kitsune, who was stood completely still, the blank eye sockets staring. You think I would think you're Anbu just because you're dressed up like one? The Otonin barked, eyes shining maliciously in the silky moonlight, his hands devoid of any weapons, but there was a katana at his waist, and no doubt had other weapons hidden in the folds of his clothes. The genin turned, suddenly aware that they were in a very, very dangerous situation, and somehow in the middle of all the danger, had managed to stumble across Kitsune. Silly little boy. The dark-haired man shook his head, black eyes narrowed. You're about 11? 12? Kitsune bristled, making the Otonin bark with laughter once again. Well, don't think I'm just gonna let you get away with it. I'm gonna kill you and your little free dash. He was cut off by a chuckle. The Otonin was surprised to see it came from the masked boy. It's true you caught me off guard before. Kitsune started, reaching to the hilt of the ninjato, fingers closing around the tsuka. It won't happen again. Why did the masked boy seem so sure of his success? He was a genin at most. At least he's underestimating me, Kitsune thought, drawing the ninjato rapidly, before letting the blade rest at his side. Your death will be painful, I won't lie to you and say it won't. Kitsune slid a foot slightly to one side, finding his center of gravity. You caused me to break a promise to myself. Sasuke stepped forwards, kunai in hand, Sharingan glowing red as he stared hatefully at the Otonin. This isn't your fight, Uchiha. Kitsune growled, cursing all Uchiha's stubbornness. HN. Kensuke, get everybody out of the way. The blonde genin looked terrified, his green eyes wide in fear, but he nodded, grabbing both Sakura and Sasuke before disappearing into the tree line. When I'm finished with you, I'll go after them. They won't get far. I'll pick them off one by one after I'm done. Nobody will ever be able to recognize their bloodied core dash. The Otonin made a mistake. He threatened those Kitsune had vowed to protect. Shut up. Kitsune covered the distance in a blink of an eye, and the only thing that saved the Otogekyo shinobi was years of ingrained reflexes, his katana blocking what would have been a fatal hit. He pushed the blade upwards, forcing the Anbu away from him. His mind flicked through the dozens of tactics that he had learned over the years, but he had yet to see what the boy could do. Yet the Oto Nin should have never looked away. Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu. Kitsune still had his hands locked in the bird seal when the water surged upwards, gathering in the shape of a huge dragon that coiled around his body, before the creature let out an ear-splitting roar, the water swirling and hissing violently. How had the boy even had the time to finish the jutsu? That particular jutsu had many hand seals. How had a genin managed to complete them all in such a short time? Katon, Ryuka no Jutsu. Flames flew to counter the colossal water dragon, leaving the dark clearing full of steam, moisture sticking to his skin, like another layer of clothing. Something sharp dug into his neck, and blood trickled down the hollow of his throat, gathering in the material of his fishnet shirt. You forced me to do this. The Anbu kid whispered harshly into his ear, no compassion or childishness present in his tone. It was as emotional as stone. The blade was removed for a moment, and the Oto Nin thought for a moment that his life had been spared. Uzumaki Naruto was your killer. The boy whispered venomously. Remember this in the afterlife. The blade descended gracefully, meeting little resistance, red life liquid spurting in all directions, dampening the fabric of his shirt, sticking to the white porcelain mask. He had broken the last promise, to not kill another living thing. Kitsune bowed his head. And I hope you never forgive me. The steam cleared, leaving the still corpse in plain sight, blood already pooling beneath the motionless figure, the once gray shirt now entirely red, dark eyes staring vacantly at the full moon. He bent down, placing a finger on each of his fallen enemy's eyelids. He dragged them down, closing the empty orbs for the last time. You can come out now. He motioned to the genin it's safe. The masked figure stood and turned towards Team 7, moonlight reflecting off the bone-white mask, marred slightly by the dripping liquid that covered the lower left half, but 4 red lines could be clearly seen running from forehead to chin. Red spiked hair was visible behind the mask. The ninjato was slid back into its sheath with a tiny click noise, bringing the 3 genin back to their senses. Cautiously they stepped forwards. Are you Kitsune? Sakura asked, finally finding the courage to speak. Even though she stuttered as badly as Hinata did, she considered it an achievement, since either of the 2 boys had moved to speak first. There was a sigh. I suppose I am. It had been half an hour since he had saved them from the Oto Nin, and so far all they had done was ask questions. Even the Uchiha had put his 2 cents worth into the conversation. This, quite frankly, was worrying. Where do you live? Why did you leave? What happened? What's your name? He was glad they hadn't recognized him. The hastily placed henge made sure they didn't, but the noise they were making was giving him a headache, and he was still on the lookout for any enemy Nin approaching, but it seemed not even the animals that usually inhabited the forest were present. He would have to tell his senpai, or even the sandame if things got worse. Kitsune hadn't talked to the third since that day, since he told the old man that he quit. Almost every rule he had forced to himself to follow had been broken now, shattered. He had told himself never to use jutsus again, under any circumstances, to never commit an act of violence, to not kill, to find a peaceable solution to every conflict, to never carry a weapon, to never associate himself with the ninja of Konoha. He had used jutsus, he had killed the Oto Nin without even speaking to the man, with a weapon he had been carrying, to protect the genin of Team 7. Kitsune sighed. Fight me, the Uchiha demanded, standing to his feet. Kensuke frowned, wide eyes flicking between the masked figure and his teammate, fists clenched. He was worried and nervous yet didn't bother to hide it. He knew the outcome would not be in the Uchiha's favor. Sakura bit her lip, focusing her entire attention on the raven-haired boy, also worried. I always have wanted to knock some sense of humility into him, Kitsune thought. An unseen grin passed over Kitsune's face. The poor Uchiha, oblivious to his fate. Kensuke's frown darkened, his fists clenched so tight that the skin turned white, his green eyes as unforgiving as stone. But his glare was not directed at the ex-Anbu, but at the smirking Uchiha. When you're hurt, Sasuke, there's no sympathy from me. Tora's nephew scowled. Kensuke. The pinkette flared, her fist missed him by centimeters. Don't say that about Sasuke-kun. He can beat Kitsune any day. Fine, Uchiha, let's see if that Sharingan of yours can keep up. He was glad that Tora had been following him the night before. The scroll had helped more than he had expected it to do. There were a few jutsus he had never even remembered learning. He rolled his shoulders a little, ignoring the stiff muscles protesting. Even thinking about moving tomorrow made him groan in pain, but the Uchiha mistook it. Don't think I'll go easy on you. The raven smirked, his eyes glowing red as he activated the Sharingan. the two tomo visible even in the liquid moonlight as he slid back into the typical Uchiha taijutsu stance. Unfortunately for the young Uchiha, Kitsune knew the stance like the back of his hand. K wasn't his senpai for nothing, and after seeing the fight between Kensuke and Sasuke, he also knew exactly where the Uchiha's weak, less guarded points were. The Uchiha didn't pause a second, instead rushing forward with chakra-enhanced speed, hands already partway through the seals for the Hausenka no Jutsu. An A rank? Again? Kitsune sighed mentally. This bright spark needs a good hit to the head. Before Sasuke could finish his hand seal, he had to dodge Kitsune's Suetun Daibakafu no Jutsu. The water surged upwards, pausing for a moment before heading towards the Uchiha's jutsu, quenching the flames, leaving the Uchiha in a sodden heap, unable to even get to his feet, after the water had crashed down full force on top of him. I think you've had enough, Uchiha. And with that, Kitsune turned and began to walk away. The boy had tried and failed, second round was out of the question. Don't turn your back on me, he heard the Uchiha yell. He made a mental note to tell Kakashi to step up his training with the Sharingan. Kitsune stopped, glancing down at the prone boy. Sasuke-kun. Having been silent till now, Sakura rushed from her hiding place, before crouching protectively over Sasuke. How could you? Monster! You hurt Sasuke-kun! Kitsune flinched, old memories fluttering before fading away once more. He bowed his head, perhaps he had gone too far. Sakura backed away, unsure of what the ex-shinobi would do. She had been told stories by her father about how almost everyone who joined the Black Ops never came back the same as when they had entered. This man-boy could kill her, and no one would any wiser. He did ask for it, Sakura-chan, the Kensuke pointed out, much to the Pinket's distaste. Kitsune took a tentative step towards his fallen opponent, noting how Sakura tensed and reached for her kunai pouch. He held out his hand, and in it rested a small, round pill, the moonlight not to blame for its strange glow. Take it will help him recover at least. She hesitated, unsure of what to do, but a glance at the Uchiha, who still hadn't managed to get up from the floor, she reached for the pill. Kensuke had expected the ex-Anbu to take off, but instead, he sat down in a rather ungracious manner, before laying back, stretching his limbs out on the dirt, much like Kensuke had done after his fight with the Uchiha. The mask slipped a little, and Tora's nephew jumped. Kitsune didn't even seem to notice the boy's curious stare, as he nudged the mask back into place. But now Kensuke was even more curious. Kitsune's eyelids drooped momentarily. He knew he was dangerously near his limits of energy. He probably had enough to get back to Konoha, since the last soldier pill had been given to the Uchiha, since the boy had been stubborn enough to stand in the way of the Suetun Jutsu. He had given the Uchiha the chance to dodge the attack, but no, his pride had forced him to take the brunt of over 2 tons of unforgiving water. Stupid Uchiha pride. Kitsune glanced around, wary for any more attacks. The Otonin had no reason to be in the Shinomori, and that's what worried him most. There was no reason to attack the Genin either. It wasn't like they were even trespassing on Odogakyu's soil, so he would have to tell the Hokage about this. When the Genin were ready, he led them to the nearest exit, a point furthest away from any Chunin who could report them, and watched as the 3 figures disappeared into the night. Shunshin no Jutsu. He disappeared in a silent tornado of leaves. An Otonin, you're sure? Naruto nodded wearily, head held in his hands. Kakashi sighed, leaning back in the kitchen chair, obviously worried. I'll tell Sandame unless you want to go. The silver-haired man trailed off, suggesting that the boy should go and speak to the Hokage, but not saying it out loud. But both heard those unspoken words, both understanding. I suppose I could. He has a few of my things I need to get back. Kakashi fought the urge to smile. It seemed finally after all this time, they had managed to get through to him. Naruto yawned, stretching his tired arms above his head, lowering them slowly before letting them drop back to his sides. Will you be able to get back home in that condition? The Jounin asked, concerned by how fatigued the blonde appeared to be. I might. Naruto shrugged, uncaring. I'm not sure. Kakashi chuckled before standing from the chair he had been sat in and walking over to the spare bedroom door, nudging it open. It's all yours, nobody else uses it anyway. Why did Senpai not own ramen? Naruto had searched every cupboard, but hadn't been able to find anything even remotely like ramen, just a stack of boring canned food. Every single cupboard was filled with the things, and Naruto was quickly losing what remained of his self-control. Feeling like he deserved an emotional breakdown after the night before, he left the house and wandered over to Ichiraka's, deciding that he could put the meal on his senpai's tab, since the man deserved it for not having any ramen in the house. I need to speak to the Hokage. The secretary peered over the bridge of his glass, giving the boy a once-over before his eyes dropped back to the paperwork he had been filling in before the civilian brat had interrupted him. I'm sorry, he's busy preparing for the Chunin exams. I need to see him. The damned brat hadn't moved an inch. I said he's busy. For a moment, the secretary thought that the boy would leave, but instead the blonde leant forwards, a blank look on his face. Code in, SD-435, mission complete. The secretary sneered, but he typed in the code regardless. The boy had made the mistake to use an Anbu code. Who would have believed the boy was Anbu? Mission incomplete. The words glared red, and a quick glance at the date the mission was set told him it was an old mission, perhaps 2 or 3 years old. When he looked up, the boy had gone. He stood from his seat, eyes scanning the entrance for any sign of the strange boy, before his attention turned to the squad of Anbu. You didn't see a boy run towards the Hokage's office, did you? He asked worriedly. The boy could have been a spy. The Anbu shook their heads, and with that the secretary sat back down on his chair dejectedly. If the Anbu hadn't seen him, he must have given up and left. The man smirked. The boy had obviously run away after he had figured out that the code he had given in was a Black Ops mission code. What's up, Taicho? One of the Anbu asked. His codename was? When that boy came in you got all weird, Tori added, her arms crossed, a frown obviously on her face, though hidden because of the mask. He, the captain of the team, giggled. Taicho, the third member of the squad, Nazumi, added, you are possibly the most insane person I have ever met. Ha ha ha, Tora collapsed in a fit of laughter, her mind briefly wondering why Naruto, after all this time, had finally decided to come and visit the Sandaime. The 3 Anbu's sweat dropped. Why did their captain have to be so damn insane? Naruto took a deep breath, chiding himself for ending so caught up in his senpai's plans, but he knew he had already given up and decided to go along with it. I think that part of me forced myself to go along with it. Wait, I sound as insane as Tora. He shook his head, then gently pushed open the door. It's been a while, Naruto-kun. You did what? The Hokage chuckled. I can't believe Sasuke-kun actually challenged you to a fight. He shook his head from side to side. Yeah, well, let's just hope he won't do it anytime soon, Naruto smiled, before his face turned serious once more. There's no problem with Otogekure, is there? No reason for them to attack Konoha? The old man sighed, suddenly looking far older and more fragile than he had a few seconds before, tired eyes drooping closed for a second. Unfortunately, it's classified information. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Naruto grimaced, a look of pain crossing his face in a flash before disappearing. The last he had heard of Otogekure, it had been a fairly peaceful village as far as he knew. There was no conflict between them and Konoha. That reminds me, Hokage-sama, do you still have my equipment in the stores? The Sandaime's eyebrows furrowed, obviously confused. But you said you never wanted to see those things again. Naruto interrupted him. I've said a lot of things. And broken many promises too. The professor opened the drawer, which contained a dark silver key, rust setting in at the base. Retrieving the sliver of metal, he laid it on his desk. Thank you, Hokage-sama. The boy began to stand, but was stopped. Wait a second, Naruto-kun, there's something else. Another key was handed over. The blue-eyes boy cast a glance towards the smiling Hokage, who made a shooing movement with his hand. A present. Naruto knew better than to ask, so he left silently. The Hokage chuckled, before lighting his pipe and getting back to the never-ending paperwork. Surprisingly, the door opened easily. Naruto had half expected the door to be rusted shut, or at least a little hard to open, but the door opened with barely a noise. The 3 walls of the storage cell were covered with many different kinds of weapons, from kunai and shuriken, to bows and swords. But most of them he never used anyway. There would be only so much he could carry. There was only one thing he came for, and he knew, even after all this time, exactly where he had last put it. Flipping open the lid of one of the wooden chests, he carefully pulled out the weapon before strapping it to his back. Without staying any longer than he needed to, he left the storage cell. He placed his key back in his pocket, knowing that he would probably return for some other things later, but the weapon on his back was the only thing that he needed right now. Cold brushed at his fingertips, startling him for a moment, before remembering the other key the Hokage had given him. It looked pretty much like any other key he had owned, perhaps a little more tarnished and rusty than most, but nothing special. 2 numbers engraved at the very bottom. 21. Meaning Vault 21, the vault at the end of the next corridor. Slinging the key back into his pocket, he began to walk down the corridor, trying to remember which of the doors led on to the next hallway over, failing miserably in the process. His mind wandered, drifting back to the night before. Each of the genin had really shown their colors. Kensuke had been very defensive, keeping an eye out for his teammates. Sasuke had been the opposite, leaving his other two teammates to fend for themselves while he went off on his own, and Sakura hadn't actually done anything, but nobody seemed to take her seriously enough to take the time to teach her anything worthwhile. Yet she had seen when a move that had left Sasuke's side unguarded for a second, which had really confused him, throwing his whole opinion of her out of the window, and all he could do was watch it hit the pavement. He sighed. The door he was looking for, Vault 21, was visible now, at the very end of the corridor. Almost there, at least. Retrieving the key cautiously from his pocket, he turned it over a couple of times, only wondering now what could be on the other side of the door. Better now than never. This door gave him more trouble than he expected, having rusted shut. It must have been a while since the door had last been opened, but a well-placed kicked, and it opened far enough to let him squeeze in. The room was almost empty, all the surfaces covered in a thick layer of dust, his footfalls disturbing the stillness of the room. The only contents of the room, a small case. Flipping the catches open, he threw the lid open. And he stared. Not moving for several seconds. Not sure whether he should be grateful or annoyed. The case was lined with three-pronged kunai, each hilt covered with a paper seal. The Flying Thunder God technique. Hiraishin no Jutsu. The only technique he had been prohibited from learning. You're late, Kakashi said monotonously, his eye never once glancing from the pages of Ika Ika, broken every so often when he moved to flick over the next page. We are? The three genin looked a little tired, and Kakashi noticed Sasuke was favoring his left leg ever so slightly, but just enough to notice it when he walked. What had Naruto done to them? Have fun last night? The Jounin asked, his voice monotonous once more, but a small smile was on his lips. Well, Kitsune was interesting, Sakura said hesitantly, when neither of the two boys answered for her. Interesting, eh? Kakashi laughed, only in his head though. It seems Kitsune has gotten a little melodramatic in his old age. And what happened to Sasuke-kun? He asked, thoroughly enjoying the torture he was inflicting upon his students. What can I say? Naruto had to get his attitude from somewhere. Sasuke directed a famous Uchiha scowl at the silver-haired sensei, to which said sensei smiled, his eyes crinkling upwards. Lost. Sasuke finished, his scowl deepening further still. He was going to be the next Hokage. Kakashi shut the book with a snap, causing Kensuke and Sakura to jump. I would have hardly expected you to win. But... Kakashi cut the Uchiha off with a wave of his hand. No buts about it. The Uchiha dropped his gaze back to the floor. And what about you two? The silver-haired interrogator asked, gaze flicking between the two other members of his team. Kensuke frowned. Was he always like that, sensei? Like what? So the blonde trailed off, not finding any way to express what he was feeling. Kakashi suddenly looked serious, surprising the three children, and turned away from them, facing back towards the center of Konoha. I suppose you're all well enough to train, but we can do that later. It's midday already. Perhaps we can go find Naruto for lunch. I'm sure he'd love to hear about Kitsune. What? It's lunchtime? The three genin yelled in almost practiced unison. Sakura smiled. I guess we were all pretty out of it, huh? They hurried after their rapidly retreating sensei. Slide, step, turn, block, strike, drop, strike, turn back. Naruto wiped the sweat from his forehead, the sun burning his exposed back as he stood in the middle of a vacant training ground, his katana held loosely in his hand. He might be completely exhausted, but there was still a smile on his face and a sense of achievement. It was then that his stomach rumbled, and he decided that Ichiraku's was nice enough to eat for both breakfast and lunch. Strapping the blade to his back, he began to walk towards Konoha, taking his own sweet time. Look! Kensuke pointed, the frown replaced by his sunny smile at Shika and Kiba's teams. Almost all the seats were filled, and Team 7 had to squeeze in on the last 4 seats at the counter to place their orders. Let's just say the Uchiha was not impressed being crushed either side by both Kensuke and Kiba. So Shika! Kensuke yelled, once again arms windmilling wildly. Watch have been up to? Watching clouds. And? No, that's about it. Kensuke frowned. But you have to have done something. Nope, the lazy slacker grinned, too troublesome. Right, the frown suddenly disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Chuji? Me? The Akimichi shoveled more food into his mouth. Not much. You know, Kensuke didn't really like the blonde-haired Yamanaka, but he didn't want her to feel left out. Me? Working at the shop, she tossed her platinum blonde hair over her shoulder, but nothing exciting really. Kensuke smiled. It had probably been the first time that the girl hadn't shouted at him or told him to go away when he asked her a question, and he turned to Team 8. Tochi smiled at the young genin sat at the counter, recognizing Team 7 as Naruto's friends from before. Talking of the blonde, he wasn't there. Tochi-san. Kakashi waved a greeting, eyes creasing in a smile nobody could see. Kakashi-san? The ramen stall owner nodded back to the silver-haired jounin. Has Naruto-kun been here yet? He was here this morning and he seemed pretty annoyed, kept muttering about how senpai would pay for the lack of ramen. Kakashi gulped. Naruto wouldn't get so worked up over ramen, would he? Would he? Kakashi resigned himself to his imminent demise. Did he say where he was going? He said something about going to see Hokage-sama. The stall owner shrugged, but he didn't say much about it. The jounin sighed. Perhaps they wouldn't be joining Naruto for lunch. Finally, Naruto grinned. It had taken what felt like forever to get from the training ground all the way to Ichiraku's, and at last he had finally arrived. He winced as his stomach rumbled painfully, reminding him of how hungry he actually was. Ichiraku's, here I come. Kakashi Hatake swallowed, eyes wide and staring, his entire body rigid. He didn't move an inch, just kept staring forwards as if his life depended on it, completely still, and unbeknown to all the other patrons to Ichiraku's, who all stared curiously at the statue that was once a jounin, puzzled at his strange behavior. His life really did depend on it. Sasuke frowned, glancing momentarily at his sensei and then back to the bowl in front of him, continuing to eat as if absolutely nothing was wrong. Not even bothered about whatever was troubling the silver-haired man. Both Kensuke and Sakura exchanged puzzled looks. Sure, their sensei was kinda weird, but when had he ever gotten this weird? Yet slowly, the other teams began to feel the air beginning to fill with a menacing killer intent, sending shivers even down the jounin's spines. Where was the source of this amazing amount of ki? Kakashi turned slowly on his seat, every fiber of his being telling him to get up and run as far away as he could, as fast as he could, except instead of seeing what he had expected to see, a zombie, or some kind of insane Kage, he came face to face with a wide, iridescent, sparkling smile. Naruto's smile looked eerily like Guy's. Hee, what a surprise seeing you, Kakashi-san. It was precisely then that the copy me knew he was a dead man. And getting ramen, no less. The blinding smile still in place, but there was nothing happy about it. It was more of a grimace. Naruto gave a hollow laugh, but somehow managed not to change his facial expression. You do realize, the blonde's smile inched a little wider, that there's no ramen in any of your cupboards? The evil look in those blue eyes promised an eternity at the bottom of a pit full of an assortment of poisonous insects, if some sort of apology was not offered quickly. Being the genius Kakashi was, plus his self-preservation instincts and lack of desire to be at the bottom of said pit, he came up with the response. Ramen on me? Kurenai turned to Asuma, whispering behind her hand. And he's supposed to be the child prodigy? The bearded jounin chuckled, but his eyes remained focused on the blonde figure, rather than turning to see his friend's reaction. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the killer intent disappeared, yet still leaving the vague air of a threat that if the silver-haired man did not supply the blonde with enough ramen to satisfy him, there would be consequences. 6 bowls. 6 large bowls. Kakashi was now officially broke. Again. Kakashi-san? The silver-haired shinobi was forcefully extracted from his melancholic daydreaming about his lack of monetary funds by the ramen stall owner, holding a sheet of bone-white paper. Your tab. Silence. My tab? Tucci gave him a look that clearly said, no, it's last year's Christmas list, and I thought you should have it. Yes, your tab. He handed over the list. It needs paying. Kakashi scanned down slowly, carefully reading the paper the ramen stall owner had given him, his one visible eye narrowing as he got further down the list, glinting evilly. Would you believe me? Kakashi shot a look at the blonde 2 seats down, happily tucking into a 7th bowl. If I said that someone has been abusing my tab? Tucci's face didn't move an inch. It was like an unyielding rock face. Kakashi was glad that the man had never decided to enroll in the ninja academy. He would have been Ibiki's best friend. It's on your tab. The older man gestured. You have to pay for it. Wait. What? Kakashi spluttered, causing the genin to look up at the flustered sensei, before they looked away again, now regarding the behavior as normal. He had just spent the last of his money on Naruto turned, and after a brief second, winked, a small, almost unnoticeable movement, then quickly followed by an obscure hand signal, which Tora had created. Sucker! Kakashi didn't know whether to laugh, cry, attack the blonde, or do all of those things at once, possibly taking the old ramen vendor and the offending tab at the same time. He sighed, ruling all those options out at the moment. Perhaps later. He shot the blonde an evil look that promised pain, suffering, and death. Naruto stared right back, with a calm, collected gaze that could only be saying, "Bring it." Kakashi got to his feet, but nobody reacted, having decided that Team 7 Sensei was absolutely insane, so anything he did just had to be passed off as normal. Gray eye narrowed, shooting lightning bolts at the blonde, who had also got to his feet. This would be it. The ultimate showdown. "What ya doin', Kakashi Sensei?" Kensuke looked up, brushing his wild hair out of his eyes. "I'm dancing, Kensuke," Kakashi said slowly, through gritted teeth. "I'm dancing?" "No, you're not." "No, really, I am." Kensuke turned back to his friends, voice fading into the dull buzz of sound from the genin teams. Nobody had noticed that both Naruto and Kakashi had disappeared. "If I win," the silver-haired man said, dropping back into a taijutsu stance, "you pay the tab." "And if I win?" No sign of the blonde's previous smiles were present, his face a blank, emotionless mask. Kakashi sighed, not relaxing for a second. "Then I pay." Naruto flexed his shoulders, loosening up his joints before sliding back his foot into his usual taijutsu style, the one that was taught to him by the Sandaime Hokage. Agreed. Everything was still for a moment, nothing moved, like time had just stopped, everything so silent and calm. Then all hell broke loose. Ram Horse Dragon. Doton, Doryuden. Naruto sidestepped the attack, his face not even changing expression as the writhing mass of jutsu passed by. "Really, senpai, I think you've gotten a bit rusty." Kakashi looked up, a little too late, the blonde's fingers already in a seal tiger? A Katon Jutsu? Katon, Guryoka no Jutsu. Kakashi dived out of the way, not having time to counter the raging, dragon-headed fireballs that were heading straight for him, his skin blistering from the heat. Yet it wasn't the intensity of the jutsu that surprised him most, it was the fact that an Uchiha Jutsu? When did he learn that? Grabbing the cloth of his hitai, he yanked it upwards, before setting his mind toward his next jutsu, ignoring the flaming, decimated forest behind him, and had to block against a thrust to the face, joints jolting painfully back into their sockets under the force of the blow. Had you made this about anything else? He jumped backwards, skidding back on the loose dirt to avoid a sweeping kick aimed at his ankles. Other than ramen this time, it was Naruto who avoided a blow, crouching as Kakashi's fist sailed over his head. "I might have gone easy on you, senpai." He grabbed the Jounin's forearm and twisted it back, up behind his back, forcing Kakashi momentarily to his knees, and then Kakashi disappeared in an explosion of electrifying smoke, causing Naruto to leap back. Though no sign of his pain showed, he could still feel the electric currents running through his muscles. "Right on Kage Bunshin? Where's the real Kakashi then?" He turned his gaze to the floor, expecting to be pulled down into the earth any second by Kakashi's decapitation technique, caught off guard when nothing happened. "You call me rusty?" Naruto looked up, spinning wildly for a second as he noticed 4 Bunshins heading straight for him. He reacted in the only way he knew how. "Futon, Akubi Kachu." Everything seemed still for a moment, deathly still. Then everything was drawn towards the lone blonde figure, the shadow clones, dirt, trees, rocks, drawn by a whistling wind as strong as a hurricane that ripped at everything in its path, destroying, obliterating, annihilating. Debris was flung in all directions, no longer recognizable. Naruto stood at the center of the chaos, not excluded from the madness he had created. The wind tearing at his clothing, clawing at his eyes, shredding, slashing, and cleaving at the unmoving figure. Slowly, Naruto raised his hands as if commanding the wind itself to cease, and after a few seconds, it gradually died down. "That was a bit much, wasn't it?" Kakashi asked, brushing the dust from his clothes. Naruto shrugged, still not turning to face his senpai. "You were out of the way." "So you knew?" Kakashi stopped brushing his clothing and looked up, raising a slender silver eyebrow. Naruto didn't reply. Kakashi chuckled, standing upright once more. "You just wanted to try that out, didn't you?" The Jounin laughed, suddenly realizing that the attack hadn't even been aimed at him. "Wrong," the blonde muttered. "What's the reason then?" Silence. "Nope." Kakashi shook his head slowly. "I was right first time." "Shut up." Naruto growled. So who wins? Me or you? Naruto turned, a scowl plain as day on his face. Kakashi sighed. Whoever wins after the next couple of moves? The blonde nodded before revolving on the spot and driving his fist into the silver man's chest, flinging the Jounin to the floor, who used the momentum from the strike to spin back to his feet. That was a bit raw. Kakashi hurled himself backward as the blonde's fist soared towards him. The amount of chakra concentrated in the fist made his teeth jolt together. The kid was totally serious about ramen. Yet the Hatake wasn't known as a prodigy for nothing. That was a bit raw. He didn't manage to finish his sentence. Kakashi hurled himself backward as the blonde's fist soared towards him, the amount of chakra concentrated in the fist making his teeth jolt together. If he got caught by an attack like that, it would no doubt end up with him in the hospital. He hated hospitals with an insane kind of fervor. He despised the pungent smell of disinfectant that lurked on every corridor. He loathed the plain white walls and the crisp white sheets. He detested the noise of echoing footsteps and the hushed murmurs behind closed doors. So it was decided, he wouldn't hold back in case he ended up in that white-filled hellhole. The fist missed him by millimeters. The kid was totally serious. And this was a fight about ramen of all things. Yet the Hatake wasn't known as a prodigy for nothing, but this was an almost Hokage he was fighting. If he just surrendered now whilst he had the full use of his body. I give. His surrender was interrupted when a foot smashed into his ribcage, thankfully not chakra-enforced, but the faint aura could still be felt. Naruto had cancelled it at the last second. The pain raced through his body as he stumbled backwards, narrowly avoiding landing an ungainly heap on the dirt, staring up at the bright blue sky as a flock of birds passed overhead. 8 if you wanted to know the precise number. So fast, Kakashi muttered to himself, I didn't even feel it coming. Naruto stared, his foot still raised after the kick, having not moved a muscle, an odd half-smile on his face. Kakashi groaned. I expected you to move, the blonde stated monotonously, his foot lowering slowly back to the ground in surprise. Kakashi winced, inspecting for any broken ribs that Naruto's attack could have caused, hissing in pain as he found a few. I was expecting you to listen to me, he hissed irritably, still staring up at the limitless expanse of azure sky. I didn't hear you say anything. Naruto frowned, brushing the hair out of his eyes, reaching a hand out to pull the wincing Jounin to his feet. So does this mean? The blonde easily tugged the older man to his feet. I won? There was a silence, in which neither of the friends said a word, broken only by the rustling of the leaves in the trees. Naruto started to laugh. The only thing that kept Kakashi from strangling the boy was the fact his ribs felt like they had been set on fire. You know, you really should go to the hospital or something, Naruto pointed out as the silver-haired man grimaced in pain, stopping for a second to catch his breath, hand pressed against his chest. I'll be fine, he growled. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the Hatake, who was refusing to meet his gaze. At least I don't have to pay for all those bowls of ramen, Naruto gloated, one eye on the path in front of them, the other watching Kakashi's reaction to his words. It was always fun to tease Kakashi. It used to be his Anbu team's old pastime, teasing Inu until he snapped. He sighed, before turning his mind to other things, the desire to annoy Kakashi suddenly disappearing like dust in the wind. Something wrong? Naruto glanced up at the older man, before returning his gaze back to the worn trail with a faint shake of his head. They began to walk in comfortable silence, only interrupted every so often by Kakashi hissing as the ribs jolted together painfully, but he never complained, which had Naruto even more worried than usual. It was almost a law. Kakashi always complained. It didn't matter whether it was a S-rank mission, D-rank mission, or a lazy day off, he always found something to complain about. It was when the silver-haired man was silent you had to really worry. Naruto turned towards his friend, blocking off any means of escape. I'm not giving you a choice now, senpai. Whether you like it or not, you are going to that hospital. You have your genin to train. His blue eyes blazed fire, and within a second they were in the entrance of the hospital. Kakashi shook his head. The disorientated sensation he felt was proof that he had just been transported by a shunshin. Naruto was already at the reception desk, dragging one of the nurses over. It was precisely then that Kakashi resigned himself to his fate. A fate filled with white rooms that had an overpowering aroma of antiseptic and beds with crisp, white sheets. And no Naruto. And no genin team. Perhaps it wasn't so bad. Naruto lazily rolled onto his back, staring at the lonely, white clouds as they floated across the limitless blue. To anybody walking past, he could have just been a normal child, relaxing in the warm afternoon sunlight, but his mind was working at 100 miles an hour. It had been 3 days since Kakashi had been released from hospital, and had gone to train the Uchiha, leaving his other 2 members to deal with their training alone. "Can't you just say no or something?" Kakashi had laughed ruefully, his head buried in his palms. "Us ordinary mortals can't just go head-on with the council like you used to." Naruto shot the Cyclops an evil glare that made the older man shudder. "What about Sakura and Kensuke? You can't just ditch them and hope for the best?" Naruto spat bitterly, turning around so he had his back to his oldest friend. "Can't you just train them all together? It is all about teamwork after all." "It's not that simple. The council has changed since you left them to their own devices. Danzo runs the show now. Apparently all Sasuke needs is a team of 3 to get through the first few exams." "So they're expendable?" Naruto barked with false laughter. His blue eyes flashed like steel in anger. "After all, us Konoha nin are told that teamwork is the answer to everything?" Kakashi dropped his eyes to the floor, before softly muttering, "I just need your help." The blonde's eyes softened, then slowly shut, a frustrated sigh escaping his lips. "I'll see what I can do." And that was why he was sat the way he was. Kensuke? He was sure Tora could help him there, if she was back from all the recon missions she seemed to be getting recently. Sakura? That was the real problem. He had no idea with the girl. Sometimes she seemed like an empty-headed fangirl, like so many of the Kunoichi in her academy class, other times like the time when she had seen Sasuke leaving a hole in his defense, or when she had seen the genjutsu the academy teacher Irika had used to disguise himself as an enemy nin. He would have liked to have trained her himself, but he couldn't just waltz up and expect her to understand. "Oh hi Sakura, did I forget to tell you I'm Kitsune? It must have slipped my mind earlier. I know it really was a silly mistake, and yes I was in line to become Hokage and then I left, and now here I am. Let's get training." No. Things just didn't work like that in the real world. He needed someone that could help her become strong, improve her taijutsu yet break her fangirl tendencies. A malicious smile spread across his face as he sat bolt upright. She would be perfect. Mitarashi Anko was having a perfect day. It was pretty easy to achieve. It involved insane amounts of dango and nobody pestering her the entire 24 hours. It was about to be rudely interrupted. He had met Anko after only a year in Anbu. He had been one of her escorts when she had first arrived back in Konoha. She had spent the entire 2 months trying to see under the porcelain masks. They became friends, not particularly close, talking whenever they passed on the street. He hadn't spoken to her since he had left. How was he supposed to force her to train Sakura? Anko-san? She whirled around, eyes narrowing as she caught sight of the slightly familiar blonde brat standing in front of her, his hands dug deep into his nondescript jacket. A civilian. "What is it, brat? What do you want?" she snapped. Her perfect day had been messed up by some random kid pestering her. How did he even find out her name? "You don't remember me, huh?" It didn't sound much like a question, it sounded more like a statement. His bright blue eyes dimmed a little. He sounded a little sad. "Sorry?" Naruto glowered up at her, and it was then she realized she had seen that exact same look a long time ago. It was a look that only one person could achieve, like a volcano on the very edge of erupting. Anko bit her lip. "Naruto?" He grinned, which made the breath catch in her throat. The whole time she had known the boy, she had only ever seen him smile a handful of times. "I guess you remembered then." She nodded, for once uncharacteristically still and silent. Naruto kept smiling, but his request surprised her. "I have a favor to ask you. How do you feel about retraining a fangirl?" A malevolent, sinister grin spread across her face, and her eyes brimmed with a sadistic gleam. Perhaps her day wasn't so bad after all. A few minutes later, and he found himself sat at the nearest dango restaurant, discussing the details of the girl's upcoming training. "So how come you've disappeared off the map for so long? Last I heard you were in line to follow Hokage-sama." She finished her first plate of dango, and then moved on to her second. Naruto looked up from his daydreaming, a bitter look crossing his, didn't know how to react. She stalled for a few seconds at a complete loss of what to do to make the boy cheer up. The plate in front of him still full of dango, which he prodded around the plate for a few seconds before they were removed and devoured by the purple-haired Kunoichi in front of him. "I left." The dango were spat across the whole length of the restaurant, hitting a Chunin on the back of the head with a soft spluck noise, and any complaints said Chunin was about to make were silenced by Anko's killer intent look. If anybody had really cared, it broke the world record for dango spitting. "You what?" She slammed her hands down on the table, knocking over the small vase at the center of their table, not caring as the water spilt over the edge and trickled down onto the floor. Please, Anko. Naruto murmured softly. Without breaking eye contact, people are beginning to stare. She glanced left and right, noticing the wide eyes and worried expressions that were on most people's faces. How had Naruto noticed them without breaking eye contact with her? She waited a couple of seconds, then the people began to turn back to their own conversations, gradually forgetting about the crazy woman shouting at the young boy. You left? Her voice was full of surprise and sadness. 2 years ago now. Naruto nodded wearily, a ghost of a smile playing across his face. And you've done nothing since? A bit here and there. He shrugged, nothing much. And what was this request about then? The last piece of dango had been left on her plate, and she didn't look like she was about to pick it up until she had gotten to the very bottom of this mystery. Naruto sighed. It's Kakashi's genin team. He's had the council on his back to train Uchiha Sasuke in the mighty ways of the Sharingan. Naruto spat, showing his intense dislike for the Dijitsu, but it leaves the other 2 members in a bit of a bind. One I'm pretty sure can manage with his family, but Sakura came from a civilian family, she has nowhere to go. Anko nodded, but still the dango was left on her almost empty plate. To be honest, she's pretty useless in everything but book smarts. I've never seen her use ninjutsu or genjutsu. She has the basic academy taijutsu stances, but she hasn't done anything with them. She has faster reflexes than most gen in her age and an almost limitless fangirl obsession over Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto stopped, carefully analyzing Anko's reaction to her new student's skills, or the lack of. And I have how long to train her? Hook, line and sinker, Naruto thought. About 3 weeks. Anko smiled sweetly at the blonde in front of her. When do I meet this pathetic excuse for a kunoichi? Kakashi burst into unceremonious laughter, then gracefully fell off where he had been sitting on his kitchen surface. Naruto sighed as the still sniggering man appeared above the cabinets again. You did what? It's really not that funny, senpai. But Anko? With Sakura? He disappeared with unrestrained laughter. Naruto rested his head in one of his hands with yet another sigh, trying to picture the man that was presently on the floor giggling like a little girl as the same man that he had fought and killed beside years ago. You don't seem to have much faith in your pupil. But well, she's Sakura. That sentence had a sobering effect on the Jounin-sensei, who got to his feet and walked silently over to the table where Naruto sat, before he slumped down into one of the well-worn chairs. So you don't care about her? Your teammate? Kakashi winced, each word biting into him like a sword blow, leaving nothing but a cold and empty feeling behind, as if everything had been yanked out from inside of him. Those that break the rules and regulations are scum. But those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. Obito, he looked up to frosty blue eyes, and Kakashi could see the pure anger that was writhing just below the calmer surface. He wasn't this boy's senpai anymore. In fact, he hadn't been for a long time now. It was easier to just pretend. To pretend. You'd rather ignore her and hope she gets killed? Again with that soft, emotionless voice that went through his very soul. He didn't know what he really thought about Sakura. She fawned over Sasuke, she ignored Kensuke, she had absolutely no skill in taijutsu, ninjutsu or genjutsu, but her chakra control was above average, but only because she had such small reserves. When he thought about it, she was like a more temperamental version of his teammate during the Third Great Shinobi War, Rin. He had thought the same about Rin when he had first met her. She was a medic nin, with low reserves that preferred being backup than actually harming somebody. He had thought her to be useless, extra baggage that he didn't need, but after so long he began to realize she patched him up every time he got hurt with her medical jutsu, which took more control than he ever thought she had. And at the very end, when she had to transplant Obito's eye. You understand, right? Kakashi blinked at the sudden change in emotion on Naruto's part. The blonde laid back in the rickety chair, resting his feet on the dining table, staring vaguely at the ceiling. She's not just a stupid fangirl, she just does that in the hope that someone would take a second to sit up and take notice that she actually exists, he breathed out, a smile flickering across his lips. Bad choice in the self-centered brat that is the Uchiha. Is that? Kakashi finally mustered up the courage to speak. Why you put her with Anko? Maybe, Naruto admitted, but you have a ninjutsu or a genjutsu specialist in the Uchiha's Sharingan, taijutsu or ninjutsu in Kensuke, and then poison jutsus in Sakura. It rounds off your team nicely, though there will be a tendency to lean towards ninjutsu with you as their sensei, of course. Now that Kakashi sat back and thought about it. Just promise me, Naruto began, rising up from his chair and walking towards the door. You won't abandon any of them. Just before he left, he turned back and smiled weakly. You got me? The door shut, and the spell on Kakashi was broken. The man leapt toward the door, intent on finding the boy and bringing him back inside, after what Tora had said to him about the time Naruto had broken down and shouted at her. The door flew off the hinges, leaving a dent in the graying plaster wall opposite. Naruto? But the blonde boy was long gone. So Kakashi-sensei sent you here? Sakura awkwardly played with the hem of her red skirt, not making eye contact with the scary woman who looked like she ate genin for breakfast who stood in front of her. That he did. Now where shall we start off? How about Anko put on a fake look of contemplation, but she had already planned her torture the night before. First thing for an attitude change is a change of appearance. She smiled viciously. How about we go shopping, Sakura-chan? Sakura smiled uncertainly. Was it a joke? Did this woman actually think that they should go shopping instead of training? Anko grabbed the girl roughly by the hand and began to drag the pinkette behind her, as she made a beeline for her favorite Kunoichi fashion shop. Tora nursed the bruise on her right cheek, softly promising death to the blonde idiot when she saw him next. He had decided that she was the ideal sensei for Kensuke since she had been the one to teach him the basics of the ninja arts. When she had offered him the job back, he had said, "Whoever wins?" Naruto won. Naturally, for some reason Lady Luck was almost always by his side. She was glad nobody had taught him poker yet, or at least he had never brought it up in conversation. So now she was stuck on her 2 weeks off, training her nephew an easier version of her taijutsu form. She had debated running off a few times, but she knew for a fact that the evil, sadistic, malicious blonde would drag her back kicking and screaming. She went back to cursing the blonde's existence. He lazily dangled both of his feet off the edge of the ancient, decrepit wall that he was sat on, watching the various people, civilian and shinobi alike, passing below him with an almost detached kind of interest. There was an overexcited, almost anxious buzz in the air, like an electric current. Even now, so early in the morning, the people were already getting prepared for what was to come. The Chunin exams. He watched an Anbu team briefly flitter into his field of vision, stopping very briefly to talk to a patrol of Chunin before disappearing off towards the direction of the Black Ops headquarters. The sun was warm and bright, but there was the smell of rain in the thick air, but no clouds in sight. Odd but not uncommon for a fire country autumn. He could hear the dry leaves rustle behind the tall, pale walls that surrounded him, and he caught himself wondering if the leaves had turned red. A metallic glint caught his eye. Naruto squinted, catching sight of an otogekure hitite glinting in the pale early morning light, the musical note glaring tauntingly up at him as he tensed, unintentionally cracking the concrete under his fingers. The dark night when he'd shadowed Team 7 into the Sure No Mori flickered back into his memories. They belonged to an unfamiliar genin team walking purposely toward the ninja academy. Their sensei walked slightly behind them, a confident, long-legged stride that told of a masterful base of taijutsu and a perfect poise that wouldn't crack under pressure. The team themselves didn't appear to be particularly worrisome. They lacked the confidence of their sensei as they peered down shadowy side streets. There appeared to be little team chemistry and the female member of the team appeared physically weak. If Naruto had to guess, the sensei hadn't been their sensei for long, and the team had been hastily put together not long before the announcement of the Chunin exams. He watched them enter the academy doors to where the first part of the grueling exam was to be held. What are they doing here? He breathed out in agitated annoyance, cursing the very existence of Otogekure no Sato, who just didn't feel like giving up on whatever stupid plan they had in mind. Who was the Otokage anyway? Would he be coming to oversee the exams with the Hokage? It was a mystery to him. He hadn't even thought about the Otokage's appearance until now. He pushed off lightly from the wall, and with a half-hearted jump, he landed lightly among the bustling people in the street below, and without hesitation disappeared amongst the constantly moving bodies. Nobody saw him, nobody ever did. Sarutobi Hiruzen dismissed the Anbu guards that stood silently on either side of the entrance to his office with an unenthusiastic flick of his hand, before slowly opening the door. The old hinges emitted a faint whine as it swung. He was glad to have a moment of peace without interruption. He had thought it ludicrous that he was one of the strongest ninja in Konoha, but it was deemed necessary to have 24/7 protection. He remembered having to explain the politics and appearances of the bodyguard protection to Naruto a few years back, when the boy had laughed at the Anbu's refusal to leave the Sandaime Hokage for the evening. He was sure the Anbu would finish their errand in a few minutes. It was hardly as though he was going to be helplessly ambushed in such a short amount of time. The old man entered his office, noticing that his protective seals were still in place, and he relaxed, turning to shut the door behind him before he heard the sound of paper rustling against paper. Hiruzen immediately fell back into his defensive taijutsu stance, carefully watching the strange figure behind his wooden desk rifling through the carefully stacked paperwork for the Chunin exam he had left there only the day before. What surprised the old Sandaime the most was the fact that the intruder didn't even look up but kept on carefully searching through the paperwork with an analytical eye. There was no sign that the infiltrator had even realized that he had been discovered in the act. Any reason in particular that you're in here? Only now the stranger finally looked up, his vibrant blue eyes meeting watery gray, before they dropped back to the paperwork once more and the Hokage relaxed, slowly walking towards the desk. The question still stands, you know. He laughed good-naturedly, removing his pipe from his official robes, and lighting it with a low-level katan jutsu, sighing with pleasure as he took the first puff. The pipe was yanked from his mouth and sharply set down on the desk, away from any paperwork that could have accidentally been set on fire by any stray embers falling from the rim. The Hokage forced himself not to squawk with surprise at the sudden movement, or rebuke the blonde, but he fell silent when he remembered Naruto's never-ending hatred of smoking. The boy certainly looked troubled, even more so than usual, even if his blue eyes were icily calm and he moved with a certain precision that was ingrained in him after so many years of strict training. Sarutobi could still tell when his almost grandson was bothered or worried about something. Like now, for example. I saw something, was the blunt reply to his earlier question, and when the Hokage waited for more explanation, he got nothing. The old man sat down wearily in his well-worn chair as the blonde continued to search through the papers, absently catching one as it floated towards the floor. A background check on the Chunin participants from Namigakure no Sato? What's wrong? The Hokage asked softly, his eyes passing between the sheet in his hands and the blonde beside him. Naruto turned towards the old man, and Sarutobi he thought for a second that an expression akin to guilt flitted across his almost grandson's face, before he shook his head and sighed wearily. Oto. The Hokage's eyes flashed like tempered steel. Did they dash? Naruto half smiled, the corner of his lip turning up ever so slightly before he shook his head. Nothing, just. He trailed off, before turning back to the paperwork and pulled a sheet from the very bottom of the precariously balanced stack. I need to borrow this. Sarutobi raised a hand to stop him, to call him back and have him explain what was wrong, but when he blinked, the boy was gone. All the windows were still sealed, the only door in the room was still closed and hadn't been opened, plus there was no remaining chakra signature to show that anybody had preformed a jutsu within the last couple of hours. Show off, the old man muttered before rearranging the constantly growing piles of work around him and setting his sights on demolishing them before the Chunin exam tournament. Ikuseki. Village, Otogekure no Sato. Rank, Jounin Sensei. Jutsu affiliation, Hibiki no Jutsu. Gender, male. Age, 32. Birth date, December 2nd. Height, 180 centimeters. Weight, 64 kilograms. Blood type, B. Kinyu Dosu. Village, Otogekure no Sato. Rank, Genin. Jutsu affiliation, Kayamaizen. Gender, male. Age, 14. Birth date, June 12th. Height, 156 centimeters. Weight, 49 kg. Blood type A. Tsuchikin. Village, Otogekure no Sato. Rank, Genin. Jutsu affiliation, Suzu Senban no Genkaku. Gender, female. Age, 14. Birth date, July 6th. Height, 150 centimeters. Weight, 39 kg. Blood type O. Abumizaku. Village, Otogekure no Sato. Rank, Genin. Jutsu affiliation, Zankaha. Gender, male. Age, 14. Birth date, September 14th. Height, 157 centimeters. Weight, 49 kg. Blood type AB. Naruto sighed. So there was something wrong as he'd first suspected. The piece of the paper into his pocket just reaffirmed his suspicions. No matter how many times he scoured through the names again and again, hoping that he was actually going crazy and it was only the paranoia playing up again, he realized with a reluctant kind of certainty that there most certainly was a problem. A big problem. Where was the name of the team, sensei? The ninja registry had every single name of every ninja from all the ninja villages, down to the exact date that they entered the academy and passed their genin exams. Even he himself was in one of the books that lined the seemingly endless corridor. All three of the genin were pretty easy to find, since they were relatively new entries to the Oto Ninja Registry, but the sensei was nowhere to be found. To many other people this wouldn't seem like much of a big deal, but Naruto had organized the exams more than just once or twice, and he knew it was regulation for all members of a team to be registered for the exams, and have a thorough check before being allowed into the hosting village. He had definitely seen a sound jounin, with long dark hair and cold, unfriendly eyes. So why was he not in the Otogekyu registration book? How had he been let into Konoha? What was up with Oto? First there was the shinobi that attacked in the Forest of Death, and just after the suspicious genin team, then classified information that the Hokage refused to talk to him about it, and Tora's mission he stopped, dread washing like ice through his body. Her mission was an information recon on the snake Sannin, Orochimaru, who had been sighted in Tano Kuni, near Otogekyu no Sato. So was he of all people was connected in this mess? He crumpled the paper into a ball with his hands, and then threw it into the bin with an unconcerned throw over his shoulder, already leaving out of the door. The keeper of Konoha's official documents found the book of Otogekyu's registered ninjas discarded haphazardly on the floor in the wrong section, but no one could ever explain how it had made its way there. Don't you think? Tora scrunched her nose up underneath her mask as she ran through the treetops that Kitsune is a bit young. There was silence, not a noise, as the three shadows passed through the forest toward their destination, after yet another successful mission. The Anbu in question was miles away, his chakra flaring left, right and center. Inu giggled in a very unmanly way before speeding gracefully ahead, leaving Yama and Tora to contemplate on the new member by themselves. Tora was silent for a second, the empty, cold black abysses that were her eyes watching the strange silver-haired man disappear into the thick foliage. What was that about? Yama muttered in annoyance. What does he know about this boy that we don't? Tora opened her mouth to say something, but was rapidly silenced when she had to dodge a shuriken aimed at her head. Melting into the shadow of a tree nearby, she watched with mild interest as a shadow fell from the branches and landed with a thud on the forest floor, followed by the sickly smell of blood. A quick glance showed it was from the band of shinobi they had decimated a few hours before. He was obviously a survivor. Tora grimaced. Well, he wasn't a survivor anymore. He's been following you the most of the way back. Tora turned sharply, kunai already in her hand, her mind skimming through the various strategies she could use as she leapt forward. There was a sigh and then a deafening crash as metal crashed against metal when her kunai clashed with the mysterious enemy's weapon. She dived backwards across the clearing and landed awkwardly on a thin branch that almost snapped under the sudden weight of her body. Her eyes darted left and right, searching for the owner of the mysterious voice. You know, you could have just said hi or something. I find being greeted with a kunai a bit rude. There was a low chuckle from the treetops. Tora jumped in surprise as the mask of Kitsune flashed silver in the moonlight. Sorry if I scared you, Kitsune muttered, and Tora could hear the smirk in his voice. She opened her mouth, but the boy that had been next to her just seconds ago had completely disappeared. There was absolutely no trace that anybody had been next to her only moments ago. They were Kage-bunshin that you sensed earlier. It's a way of covering up our trail as we head home. She heard her Captain Inu mutter from behind her. He's actually been shadowing us most of the way. Tora squawked and fell off the madly swaying branch, landing precariously on the branch below. Why the hell did you have to come up and scare me like that? Inu sniggered, and then disappeared into the dark shadows. Yama was nowhere to be seen. Men! Tora muttered before stalking off into the night. Why can't he just let me through for once? I need to speak to Hokage-sama. There was the staring match of the century being held in the reception of the Hokage Tower. The secretary versus Uzumaki Naruto. Lightning bolts crackled through the frosty air and everybody around them turned a blind eye on the massacre that was sure to come. You! The man hissed, almost rising from his chair in fury. Naruto's face was as impassive as a brick wall, giving no indication that he had even heard the furious comment. I need to speak to Hokage-sama. It was as monotonic as a gray wall in winter. He's busy. The bespectacled man spat in answer, slamming his hands down on the desk, fire burning with an unseen hate in his dull brown eyes. It's a matter of grave importance to the security of Konohagakure no Sato, he muttered between gritted teeth. Look, kid, the man snapped, what little left of his sanity remained close to breaking point. There's no point into trying to trick me, I've seen it all. Naruto tuned the man out, not bothering to even listen to a word of the ego trip unfolding in front of him. I need to speak to Hokage-sama. Anbu, I need this kid to be escorted out. He yelled at the Anbu squad guarding the staircase, and Naruto realized with a little bit of regret that these were all newbies, who wouldn't give him a chance to accidentally slip through their clutches. I need to speak to Hokage-sama, Naruto repeated grudgingly, ready to leap over the desk and throttle the man. Midway through his murderous daydream, he was interrupted. Kitsune-sama, the Hokage will see you now. He turned to look up at the man, not sure how he should react to being called by that name. The Anbu that had called him looked down calmly, and a flash of recognition passed through Naruto. The red crescent shapes that circled his eyes marked him as one of the elite. An Anbu captain. Registration number 010992. Nice to see you're doing well. Naruto nodded to the Anbu as the secretary stared between the two figures like a fish on dry land, stammering the occasional unintelligible word. How is Ina-senpai? The Anbu asked curiously, who was also ignoring the secretary who had face planted on his own desk. Naruto turned the corners of his mouth up into a small grin. Well, he still reads those smut books, so he can't be too bad. Visit him sometime. The Anbu nodded slowly, before escorting the blonde to the bottom of the stairs. Kitsune-sama? Naruto turned back to look at the masked man, who looked a bit sheepish, refusing to meet the blue-eyed gaze. I would appreciate it if you didn't tell the Hokage I let you through. He lied? The man laughed at seeing the obvious confusion on the usually stoic boy's face. I owe you a couple of favors, Kitsune-sama. Then the man laughed again. Well, if you can call my life a favor. I see. Well, the man waved his hand in a brief goodbye go, before someone figures out that the Hokage didn't actually let you in. Naruto nodded, before climbing the stairs and opening the Hokage's door. But Hokage-sa dash. The Hokage shook his head sadly, his tired eyes closed. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. There's nothing that you can do anymore. Naruto gripped the edge of the wooden desk in a vice grip, splintering in between his fingers as they dug fiercely into the wood. If you do dash. We've already got Anbu Team 2 doing surveillance, and 2 more Anbu teams patrolling the borders. There's no way that only 3 Anbu teams are going to be able to take that bastard down. You taught him yourself, right? Who gave you the right to sacrifice those teams just because of some stupid exams? Nah dash. If you just call the exams off, there's another cha dash. Sarutobi interrupted the blonde once again with a wave of his hand, getting up from the chair to stand by the window, his back to the glowering boy. There's very little evidence, and I can't rely on your word, Naruto. You're no longer an operative of this village. There were no members of Otogekure to be found in the forest, not even any trace of blood or any sign of camps or outposts. It appears I've let you have too loose of a rein, but I cannot have you jeopardizing the safety of my people for the sake of your own personal vendettas. You're acting like a spoilt child dash. But the books. Books have mistakes from time to time. I understand that you want to help Naruto, but maybe you should have thought about that before you left. There was a sudden deadly quiet, where 2 indomitable wills clashed ferociously, but no further loud words were shared. Instead, the words became subdued and sharp. I understand perfectly, Hokage-sama. Naruto sneered. Are you worried about the reputation of your village? The Hokage closed his eyes in regret. He wished he had the time to deal with Naruto, but he didn't. He knew the boy wanted to help, but he could risk his village following shadows. He'd allowed Naruto too much leeway and spoilt him. The boy would have to be stopped, in case the Chunin exams were endangered by his fool's errand. Ki Mushi, remove him. The Anbu, having returned from their mission, had remained hidden in the shadows of the office. They suddenly blurred towards Naruto, and seconds later a loud thud followed by a sickening crack echoed throughout the room. Don't worry. The blonde spat. I can see myself out, Hokage-sama. You can go back to pretending that your village is as pure as crisp snow. Footsteps. Perhaps it's time someone told you just how black the soul of Konoha truly is. It was all going so well until I opened my mouth and said something so stupid. Naruto rolled over onto his back, staring blankly at the stark, white ceiling above him. Can't he see that Orochimaru is going after the Sharingan? And he'll stop at nothing to get it? He was beyond frustrated. Those he had sworn to protect were now sheep in the lion's den, completely unaware that they were going to be devoured. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. There's nothing that you can do anymore.